Mm, There, four, three, two, one. All right. Are we good? Are we live? I think we're live. Is that right? Okay. All right. I think we're live. We are good. Hello, everyone. It's been a little hot minute since I've last streamed. Just been a little busy these last couple of weeks with holiday week, with ASIN as well, and just a number of adulting that just kind of got busy on me so suddenly and so quickly. But we're here, we're back uh, on a lovely Friday. I was gonna say I haven't streamed on a Friday since like 2021, give or take. So throws me back to the days where we didn't have too much going on, but now suddenly, of course, there's just too many things that are back and running. But no, it's been a good little busy couple weeks, as I mentioned before. But I'm excited for today's stream, which was supposed to be yesterday, but due to some slight scheduling conflict, we weren't able to do it last night. But we were able to thankfully just reschedule to the following day, to today, to which I'm excited to have our next episode of Snap and Chat, to which I'll be introducing to my guest shortly. But before we go with that, just a quick little reminder of some little things here. First of all, let's of course celebrate just another brick on the wall. Yes, we got a couple more photos to add to the wall. We did get a follow from Captain Crunch 159, to which the photo that they're contributing to this wall, funny enough, is a photo from 5 years ago, when back in the day when some of us had to do virtual shoots, which God knows, I can't believe that was something we did during the height of COVID and all that stuff. But hey, we got a creative outlet here and there. And then, of course, the photo that we're going to be having for today's stream is this photo of the fanged girl, Gina, who I've worked with many times. In fact, my guest has worked with many times with finding up this bath shoot that we did at my folks' place back in 2019, I want to say, give or take. So either way there. But yeah, as a reminder to those is that again, this is a podcast kind of format, so I will be answering people via text more often than answering on my microphone, just because I want to make sure that the guest doesn't get too interrupted by too many notifications or things like that, and just to allow them, just to talk and what have you. But yeah, without any further ado, I guess I might as well get my introduction started. My guest is one that I've known for many years. Not only a good friend, but I consider a good mentor. He was a former Chicago photographer who moved to Texas in the last year, but he also works in law for over a number of decades, but does photography on the side, to which his work particularly focuses on cosplay, glamour, and boudoir. To which he keeps himself busy with in those subjects. He also hosts an annual retreat weekends called Light Fantastic, where he and a number of photographers and cosplayers who sign up are invited to spend a weekend, an extended weekend at a lodge, or sort of like somewhere that's outside of the city limits, where he hosts basically multiple photo shoots throughout that weekend. Previous years have been in Wisconsin, particularly Washington Island, and he's planning his next retreats in Colorado. More details to come by there. But yeah, so I'm excited to have him. As I said, I've known him for many years, and I'm excited to talk a little bit more about not only his work, but especially for this episode, more on the legal aspects of photography there. And actually, yeah, perfect. Hello, Haley. How's it going? Good to see you there. Don't worry, we'll honestly haven't explained that Graham right after his introduction. But yeah, is my guest ready? Anthony, are you ready? All right, he is ready. Hello there. How you doing today, Anthony? Oh yeah. Oh, wait, hold on 1 second. 1 second there. I think I do not have your audio. Talk to me for one more time.
Right? Can you hear me?
There we go. Perfect.
Yeah, no, I was just saying that we're enjoying the little brief respite before the Texas heat kicks in. I think next week we're looking at 90s and up. We were like at 80 some today, so not too bad.
Hmm.
Uh,
No,
Nothing
perfect
too
there.
terrible, but I'm hanging in there.
You hanging in there. Perfect.
Yeah.
Haley goes hype, hype, hype right there. But yeah, so for those who don't know you, do you mind giving a little introduction about yourself? And I guess to start with one of the first questions, when and how did your spark for photography began?
Oh boy. Let's see. Well, again, I'm Anthony H Nyguen, and as you mentioned, I go by Anthony H Nyguen Photography, online. I would say my first, man, photography wise, I remember this is gonna date me. I remember when I was younger, I had one of those Kodak disc cameras. I don't know if you remember those, but it's just like, it's like a little square format type camera. You inserted like a flat disc, and then you
Little.
could
Hmm.
pictures develop from it. Nothing like I wouldn't even dare guess what converted to digital format it would be today. But it was just like something like that. It's very easy to carry about. And I pretty much stopped until I think when I came to Chicago for grad school. And that's when I kind of picked up the camera again. But that was just like hey, I'm just on and off. That was still actually, I want to say, it's towards the tail end of film. Um,
Hmm.
I arrived in Chicago because I want to say by the time I hit law school, film was not necessarily dead, but it was digital. There was a lot of talk, within the first few years, um, especially I think when I started doing some wedding work, um, with digital, people going like, oh, is that going to kill photographers? Not that everybody can be a photographer. Clearly, it hasn't. It's just you kind of adapt the tools. Yeah, I think my first, to answer your question about experience, was probably that disc camera. Again, 35 millimeter film for a bit. Then I've been digital for a good 10, 15 years now, I think.
Oh,
15
perfect.
years. Yeah. Yeesh. It's been that long.
No, well, even for me, it's been almost, I would say, about, what would I say, maybe like definitely over 10, 15 years. Well, especially because I know like I borrowed my mom's DSLR camera back in the day. But, and again, even when I finally took like formal classes of film in college, literally the intro to photo, they used to do film, but then, of course, the semester I joined, they cut it right out of the budget or something like that.
And so
So,
that's one thing I do not have is formal training. I
oh
have
yeah.
I've thought about it, but I do not have that. I mean, I've thought about like when like either when I was up in Chicago, doing maybe like an adult education class. But then my biggest, I think, hang up was, I'm sure I could learn. I mean, I think we can always learn something, but it was the photo 101 type of, community college type of courses. And I was just like, am I going to have to spend like weeks learning about, I don't know, aperture priority mode or something
Hmm.
where it's not going to help me out at this point in time? So I thought about it
Hmm.
down here too. I wouldn't actually mind finding like a Photoshop class just to see my archaic methods for Photoshop as is, if that's any better.
Yeah. No, no, perfect right there. Actually, that was gonna be like my follow-up question, whether if you were self-taught or if you took classes. So that's kind of cool right there. That one, you answered my question, but yeah, you kind of just picked it up naturally yourself right there. So no, that's kind of cool there.
I was gonna say, with if you see any framing errors in my stuff, that's on me. No one taught me how to mess up, rule of thirds or any of that,
Hmm.
the golden ratio, any of that stuff. That's just Google searches and yeah, I'm winging it for a bit.
No, no,
I'm
fair,
still winging
fair.
it.
No, I mean that's what we kind of do in general. It's like compromising or finding solutions to whatever comes to our photo shoots, whether it's the weather, lighting, and all that. We just go with the flow, if you will. So now I want to ask, because usually I always ask about like branding, because that's always important with a photographer, whether some people have like a certain name or what have you. But kind of like the question is like, why did you just decide to use your full name as the as your marketing brand?
Um, wow, that's a Good one. Let's see. Why did I use my full name? I think initially, when I hopped onto, like, let's say Instagram, I think that's kind of where I started thinking about it. I have my, private personal profile that I was like, okay, well, I'm going to do photography. And I think at the time I wanted something like, I think I want to say like when people were saying like, oh, when you come up with a username, don't make it too long, make it a little more memorable. But I was like, I thought about doing like, I think you see that maybe in some of my old links or stuff like that, where I'll say like just AHN photo. Oh, there's other people out there who have those initials. I guess it just threw me for a loop. Like, is that going to be confusing? Even though it was like a shortened, an easy way to just go at me here. Um, and I think partly too because my first foray was more into wedding. Uh, a lot of wedding photographers tended to just run with their full name or full legal name or what have you, rather than something like a little more ethereal, like eternal love, photography, or I don't know. I'm just making something up, but I just
Yeah.
went with the really bland and boring. Let's just use my name. And I think partly part of it too is there's an actual um relatively, I think much better known than me. He's somebody with my name. He got Anthony H Nyguen makeup or Anthony Nguyen makeup. So I had to include my middle initial
Hmm.
to photo because I beat him to the personal profile, but I did not beat him to the more business oriented name. And when I say he's better known as he does makeup, and I've seen like I remember his feed initially, it was like like whether it was like Beyonce or somebody, so a little above my range of action wise.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so that's I think I went with full name. I think you were actually around when I was discussing my watermark. I think I
I
had discussions with you about the watermark.
Probably.
Yeah,
I'm vaguely remembering because we've had conversations in the past before, like back in 2018 or so, when we were just like a number of like cosplay photographers in a group or whatever
yeah,
chatting, and I just remember that was like kind of like that little talk there of like how should I do my watermark, and I forget what it was, whether it was just like just keep it simple, like the simplest
yeah.
the better. I feel like.
I think there was a big trend, and I mean, no problems with the trend, but there's some that like people were doing like the whole digital signature, and my handwriting's nowhere near that good. So you could pay somebody to you see that every once in a while sign your name to make it look really artsy, whether it's
Mhm.
calligraphy or what have you. But I just was just like I typed it out. I did it in Photoshop like on a SD file like in 10 minutes, and I've run with it since. I just kept it simple. So
No, exactly. And
yeah,
honestly, yeah, because like I tried to do it simple, but I was basically recreating the Jaws like logo or just the Jaws like head for like the earlier part of my years. But thankfully, I had like and cosplay who illustrated the photo or my logo that you see now. And honestly, that's been pretty versatile as it is. So sometimes just the simplest things, the better.
yeah. No, so yours is super memorable because anytime I'm like scrolling through a feed and I see it pop up like that, an image, I'm like, oh, well, I know who that. I don't even need to see if there's any name attached to it. It's just okay. I can tell. I think the only
So
time is that throws me for the loop is like if I see a shark head elsewhere, I'll be like, oh wait, is this Eric or no? But
fair. But yeah, so before we go into photo editing, Haley did redeem explain that gram, and I think can you see it on my screen right now? I'm going to switch it over to full screen here. Oh, that's not the right one. Hold on a second. But can you see? Basically, it's
uh, oh yeah, I do.
the
Okay.
Alice in Wonderland shoot. So I thought let's start with this one because honestly, I guess like what I want to ask, like if there's any like fun stories or how did you set up this shoot? Because obviously, I know some details, but to some viewers or listeners, they might not know any details, and especially how to be able to create this sort of like concept. It almost seems like something from Vogue or I would say like an Annie Leibovitz kind of still. So, do you want to talk a little bit about this and how this shoot was made? I'm gonna try to see if I can zoom in a little
Sure. I mean, thank you. It's very. I mean, I would love to if that was considered along those lines. So that was basically my swan song photo shoot in Chicago. That's why I captured it as such. That was the last project shoot that I kind of had there. That was planned before I moved down to the not so great state of Texas. Um, the idea for a Alice in Wonderland had been I don't know. It's been percolating for a number of years. I actually wanted to do that shoot in 2019, I want to say, or was it
Mm.
what? No, 2020. I started a Facebook group.
Yeah, I was gonna
I
say it
had
says 2020 right here, so yeah.
yeah. So it was like one of those where I started a Facebook group. We had, like I said, there we were planning on May of 2020. It looks like, obviously, we had the pandemic that year, so some of the talent, some of the models changed in the intervening 5 years. Uh, for various reasons, but the idea was still there. Was I just wanted to get some characters together for the Mad Hatters, the Tea Party. Um, so I've been fortunate to work with a makeup artist in the Chicago area for a number of shoots. It's I don't he does more television movie makeup nowadays, not
Hmm.
necessarily. I know, like the last few years he transitioned away from individual type of makeup like that. I think his handle is still Corey Z Artistry on
Mhm.
Instagram, but he did the makeup for this. So we kind of played around with like concepts. I said I wanted a little some darker Alice type of vibe. Like this is what happens when Alice returns as an adult to Wonderland. Um, some characters, let the models kind of decide who they wanted to be. Again, I was fortunate enough to I've worked with all of these particular models before, so they were all into it. This particular shot is a somewhat composite shot. There is no lawn to that effect there. We had the table set up. It's a studio, and you've been there. It's up in
Mhm.
Antioch. This was
Mhm.
outdoors. It's like if I could find a behind the scenes shot, I would show you that I'll try to look it up while I'm talking, but basically it's sitting right next to like a garage.
I think I
Um,
know where exactly this is.
yeah, it's just like
At
right
the
outside on a
boutique loves.
parking lot. Yeah, it's on a parking lot, garage, everything like that. And she basically had some greenery on part of like a garage shed wall, and then I added some. The studio owner set up the table. She's got for anybody who get a chance to get up to the studio, it's boutique photo lofts up in Antioch. I mean, it's got a very eclectic, sometimes you could even say eccentric type of setup. In terms of just the sheer amount of props that you can have. They're all typically Victorian Renaissance vibe, steampunk, that type of vibe. You're not going to get anything too modern up there. But again, it's like she brought all those. The costuming is a lot of much her stuff. So basically, she and I discussed a lot of the styling of like what I was aiming for. I gave her some inspiration images. Um, and like I said, it was just one of those shoots that I just lucked out. It came together right at the end, and I was glad that I was able to do it. Uh, miss all those people dearly. I mean, I get to see them every once in a while. We try to stay in touch, online, but it gets a little tough when you're down here. I'm trying to see if I can find a tea party itself.
I'd say don't worry too much. I think
Yeah,
you've said
yeah,
plenty enough. So no, that's kind of inspiring. Like just
yeah.
the idea and all the props and all that detail. Just as you kind of said, your swan song. So I think yeah, we
I
kind of
will
really.
add. I would say I will add one thing, and that's when you're doing things like that. I don't know for you, but as a photographer, having makeup, having set design, getting involved in that, it really does make your editing afterwards a hell of a lot easier.
Mm.
I mean, I think it's a little different for cosplay, but I think for at least in terms of like what what you can get. And here's a actually I did find a image behind the scenes,
Mm,
but it's just like literally concrete and stuff like that.
mhm.
Uh,
Yeah, yeah, I can see right by Gina's leg right there and what have you. So, no, very exciting, and cool. But yeah, so yeah, so what are you going to be working on tonight?
I think I'm gonna be doing a cyberpunk set.
Hmm.
I was a big fan of Edge Runners when it came out. The little, like net running type of photo shoot with the Fangirl. I think I'm gonna do a little edits on those. As I mentioned to you, prior, it's like I do jump around on my edits, which probably explains why I'm terrible at edits, like focus wise. So I'll probably do that. Maybe jump around to a couple other uh, cosplay boudoirish type of sets. Maybe a Cinderella set, and then
Hmm.
I've got it was a concept set of like a warrior princess. So I'll probably do something along those lines
Nice,
tonight.
perfect. So, hold on, so I'm going to ask the next question, but I'm like, okay, Photoshop, what's going on with you over here? So yeah, so kind of like you come with. So usually you do a lot of concept shoots. You don't do too many like client page shoots that often, have you? Or is this kind of exciting?
Not much anymore, especially since the move. To be honest, I have not shot anything down here, Texas.
Hmm.
This past year, it was just pretty much settling in. I haven't even put my name out there. Fan Expo Dallas is actually happening this weekend, and maybe a month ago, I thought about doing what I did back up in Chicago and going on Facebook and just kind of advertising myself. Didn't do that. Um, so I think for now I'm kind of content with that because I get to do me focus on some of that. I just the creative stuff, and then not to say that paid shoots wouldn't be creative. It's just that I can kind of control, dictate, or at least have more input while I'm trying to settle in down here.
Okay.
Hopefully, maybe later on in the fall this year on here I'll start doing that. But there is something to be said about collaborative work. I think it is enjoyable. Um, Typically, when I come back up, like the last few times I've come back up to Chicago, I just put out a little feeler, and if anybody wants to shoot like collab on something, I'm more than game to try it out. Especially coming back up to Chicago, as I guess kind of it's my way of saying thank you because seriously, the cosplay community up in Chicago is, I think, awesome. Again, I haven't really put myself out down here. I can't really say, but I just know con wise and all that stuff. You guys as photographers, um, it was a really awesome community. So it's down here. It's a little lonely, but it
Mhm.
is what it is until I can get my feet under me. So.
No, not fair. So I guess so since you do a lot more collab kind of shoots, kind of like what does that process occur? So is it that you have the idea for a shoot, or does the model or talent kind of come to you? And if so, how do you kind of prep for it into that degree?
Well, with the Fangirl, it's typically fantastic. I just go, hey, I'm going to be around. You want to do something? Do you have something specific you want to do? And her answer is usually just yes, yes, with nothing really too specific. She just let's let's do it. We'll figure something out. I've got like long like I've got this a notebook of like long running themes that I jot down every time some theme pops into my head, some idea. So
Mm,
I kind of check it off, as I go along, and I keep adding. I add more than I check off because of timing. Um, again, I'm open to like if a model were to say like, hey, I dig your work, I've got this idea, and it's something that I'm like, you know what, I haven't done that, or even if I've done it, like let's give it a shot. If we can make it happen, because I do think sometimes those collaborative works, that's where both parties are bringing so much energy. Prep wise, it's just like it's I, not that I don't spend a lot of time for paid shoot prepping, but there's just something different when you're doing collaborative work and it gets you really excited. I mean, I for this particular cyberpunk shoot that I'll probably edit tonight. That I will edit tonight. Um, I mean, it's just one of those things where it's like I dug the anime so much that it's on Netflix. Everybody should catch it if they haven't yet. But it was one of those. I was like, hey, and the fangirl did not have any idea. But at the time, I think she hadn't watched it yet. It was just one of those things. I'm like, this is a vibe that we're going for. She's all in. For me, prepping is like, okay, are there some homage type of shots that I can do? Are there certain props? What am I looking for? How much special effects am I going to have to put in? At the end, and I think it's a little easier to when you're doing, me at least, it's easier when I'm doing collaborative work. Put in probably all those extra hours special effects than it is when I'm doing paid work to do special effects. I don't know if that's how you view special effects, or post processing, but yeah, I tend to probably over edit both types of work, but collaborative work is just can get lost in it for like days on the same image.
No, fair. For me, I feel like I definitely try to put whatever heavy edit work more on my paid shoots, and then collaborative work, because it is like, all right, collaborative. Sometimes it is just fashion. Sometimes it's a little lighter to a degree. So like, but I do kind of agree with the idea of like sometimes there might be a concept or an idea that you know either you or the talent come up with. So like even like one of the shoots that I edited earlier was basically we kind of rented out a studio because I was like, all right, I rented out this studio. Does anyone want to try to use it? Or actually, no, correction. I used this studio, and then they gave me, because of how I guess, for lack of a better word, the cleaning service did not clean properly, and so the person basically was like, I'm going to give you a couple free hours
Oh,
for
okay.
this. And so I was like, all right. I reached out saying like, all right, to the close friends, being like, hey, does anyone want to do this? And one friend reached out, was like, all right, I want to do this sort of shoot here, like basically like a 70s, because there was like some 70s sort of setup that they had. But then like she reached out, be like, I have this idea, like how like the girls in horror movies or what have you. And I was like, say no more. You want to do some Scream Queen stuff, right? I was like, yes, let's do it. So just the excitement, enthusiasm to do kind of like all that kind of stuff there. So no, it's like especially for concept, I
Yeah.
feel like concept is kind of nice where you can, like for paid shoots, it is nice to where, obviously you get some compensation for your work, but you also feel like you're restricted to try to make sure that you're not going to try to go too far with the experimentation to provide some good product, while the
Exactly.
collabs are always good chance to experiment, try new lighting, try new different things and what have you, or just work on concepts. So
And I think, going off of that is not to say, again, not to say that I don't spend time on editing for paid shoots. I do. Like I said, I probably spend more time than I should, only because I don't like letting things out into the wild that, and as a photographer, we're always like, okay, let me zoom in on this. Okay, like that hair is out of place or something, and nobody will ever zoom into 200% on a picture on Instagram or whatever. But when it comes to doing shoots that are collaborative versus paid, I look at it as like, hey, I can't replicate that for a paid shoot because I have a bunch of paid shoots that are coming out, and I let clients know that in advance. It's like, if you're, they might come to me and go, "This is a shoot that I'd like," and I'm like, I can do the FX on that, but you're gonna probably get a lot fewer pictures from me just because I can't return 20 images to you um, off of the shoot at C2E2 and have 20 special effects type of shots. Uh, and I think that that's partially kind of it didn't push me, but why like I do a lot. And if you look at my feed, you've seen the migration of me doing more boudoir or glamour stuff, because the editing there is no longer special effects driven for me.
minimum
It's just
minimum
it's
kind of stuff.
just like, yeah, frequency separation and dodging burning. It's that stuff still happens, but I'm not putting in like, oh, you know what, I'm going to transport them from bedroom to some mystical castle in the sky in their lingerie type of deal. Well, I mean, unless it calls for it, but yeah.
Here. So I guess kind of following up, yeah, to where the idea of doing shoots and collabs, especially when you're sort of planning shoots, do you have a preference at all whether to do locations or studio? Because I know like
Uh,
sometimes, and again, it probably also depends on the content as well.
yes, yes. I was going to say that's probably the first and foremost thing is, obviously I've done some outdoor boudoir shoots, or I call them outdoor shoots.
Outdoor.
Uh, yeah. And those up in Chicago, it was a little, there were places that you could go for some privacy from prying eyes. Um, think that's why for some of those shoots it tended to be more studio work. But if a client or somebody I was collabing with wanted to go outside, I had spots that I could go to.
Hmm.
uh Cosplay stuff, I think, my preference is more at this point indoors, only because I can control the environment. Outdoors I am good with when the makes sense, and I think it holds true for even indoors. There are just certain cosplays that I would like to see indoors versus some that I like to see outdoors. And so, it's just how I look at it. Is like it really depends on the content, the subject matter, and that kind of drives me on what I end up picking. Which whether it's studio or not.
Hmm.
Um, there's some studios down here. I will say for you photographers up in Chicago, the hourly rate down here is brutal compared
Oh,
to
it's
what.
brutal.
Yeah, there's one spot down here that I actually am waiting for a model to come to, if somebody to come down to the Dallas area, um, and shoot with me there because it's 250 an hour.
Oh,
This
damn.
place, yeah, and I mean, but it's
But
kind of like an Antioch type place, but a little more
oh,
modernish. It's down
mhm.
here. Again, it's just like that's just starting, and I'm like, okay, that's got to be a real, that's something that you got to rock out if you're going to do something like that.
Hmm. I know, yeah, it is kind of interesting, like comparing like locations where it's like, I feel like LA probably has a bunch of like locations for people to do their shoots or whatever. But then I wonder, yeah, when you do go to like sort of areas, like even though Dallas is like an urban area, but it's not as urban compared to like Chicago or whatever. And you do kind of wonder like what is kind of like the scene like over there.
Yeah, and I'm like I said, I'm exploring it, so it's a matter of, I don't. I would imagine there's plenty of a lot of the boudoir photographers that I actually followed when I was up in Chicago were FW based.
Hmm.
So, a good percentage of them were. So it's not as if like it doesn't exist down here. I think maybe it's just that um expectations are different, depending on the region. I know like when I did work in some of the cosplayers up in Canada, they were like, "Oh, we don't our photographers up in Canada don't typically charge at all, or if it was very rare for that." But then again, they weren't used to necessarily for some of them like formalized shoots. I think to the level we do down here. I mean, and just like you said, like West Coast versus East Coast photographers, even here down here, I think is a little different.
Mm. No, exactly. It's your per region. So, anyways, so the one of the things that I think is kind of interesting to talk about to bring into this episode is how you work, particularly in law, and especially I know good transition. But I guess like especially one thing that I think is always important that there is a lot of legal stuff for photographers that they sometimes need. So, can you explain sort of like thoughts or reasons why photographers should consider some sort of like what legal options, or at least have that
Yeah.
in their portfolio, if you will, or not portfolio, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I was gonna say, feel free to interrupt me while, I don't have anything like, but when you start having questions, if anything pops in your head, let me know.
Now I have a whole list of questions here. So as I said, as I said, like, all right, we talked about like how to set up and prep for a shoot, introductions, all set. All right, let's go to some heavy subjects, focus particularly with you as the guest.
yeah,
So now we're
yeah.
jumping
So
into that.
I was gonna say that. So the I think we've been through this up in Chicago, right? There were some really really some terrible behavior.
Well,
when we
not
were
not
up
not
there.
in terms of that. I'm just saying more in terms of just normal business kind of work right
Oh,
there.
okay,
So
well,
that's what I
because
mean.
my yeah. So what I was gonna say is like
Yes,
because of
yes. More
some
more
things like
more more
that.
on business. Just normal like
Yeah.
photography business kind of stuff. So that's just more what
Right.
I mean.
Okay. Yeah. So if we're talking about that aspect of it, I mean, I think the first part of it has to come. Part of it comes from it's important, and I think it's okay. This is not legal advice. This is just me, my experiences of it. Is that whether you're a photographer or you're a model or your talent, there are certain expectations, and when you're putting yourself out as a professional, even if you're doing it as a side thing, if there's some compensation at some point, for your photography, you're a professional in that way. And then so you should put yourself out as that. And by that I mean I'm not talking about like behavior like what I was alluding to earlier, but more from the legal standpoint, you need to have, when you're laying out expectations, you need certain protections, not just for you, but for your client. So, I found when I first started doing at least cosplay photography, it was surprising because, coming from wedding photography, contracts are typically a normal thing. Because, as a wedding photographer, your client, is expecting something on their wedding day or for their engagement shoot or what have you, and you have to outline, kind of detail what services you're providing and whatnot. And I think that that's something that every photographer, no matter what genre, subject matter that they're shooting, should have some. I mean, I know it sucks because you're in business and some people are like, oh, you know what, I'm just all about the art. That's great. When the art comes back to bite you in the butt and then you complain, on social media by going, oh, they did this and did that, it's like you have no protection because you didn't put yourself out the way that people understood that that's what it is. So that's why, you've been to my life fantastic. I have people signing model releases. A model release doesn't necessarily mean like, hey, because first of all, let's back up. Every image that you snap, copyrighted to you automatically. So like this image that I have here, it's a copyright to me. If I hand my camera off to you, Eric, and you take this pic, and you take another pic, take the next picture, that copyright belongs to you. Doesn't matter. It's on my camera, my CF card, none of that. That image belongs to you. You need to ensure that your work stays your work and isn't used, what we call in the copyright world, derivative work being yeah, you see Disney doing that all the time. They're like, hey, we've got a theme park and we want to sell socks. Well, that's a derivative work. You can't take Mickey Mouse and stick it on any socks, type of deal. Well, the same thing is, even though we're not expecting to sell our photographs on a pair of socks or a body pillow or whatever, the idea is it belongs to the photographer. And I think sometimes, whether it's a paid model or somebody collaborating or not, they don't understand that concept. And it's not that you're trying to be mean and say like, hey, you have no rights. I mean, that's why you have the contract to say, look, in this model release, what I'm asking for is I'm going to use it for advertisement. I'm going to ask you not to edit these photos afterwards. Don't turn my image into, you know, selective saturation, willy nilly without talking to me, that type of deal. Because I think most photographers, or at least I know for me, if a model comes to me and says that they want to do edits, I'm not. My only thing is then that's fine. Just make sure that people know it's you editing it, and you can take my watermark off of it, at that point in time, because I actually don't, because you're trying to curate, right, as a photographer, your certain style, and somebody changes something so dramatically that it's no longer your style, but they're attaching your. It's one thing to say, hey, photo credit goes to Eric because he took the photo. That's great, but if the implication is also Eric did this terrible job of editing, or at least, for some people, they might think you did a terrible job of editing. And I'm not saying that models can't edit, but if it's not doesn't fit into your style, and I don't think you necessarily want that to be um, attached to you in that way, or at least just make it clear. Because if it's a collaborative work,
Reflected
then
of,
it's a,
of one's work,
yeah,
your work.
reflecting of what you do. I mean, that's why I go like, copyright wise, photographers could do something too. You can get, get all your photographs copyrighted with the government. That's just more for protection. If like a company decides, hey, especially this is true, I think, for photographers who do stock photography image, but you never know. But I
Mhm.
also think it's not necessarily not as prevalent, but I think with the advent of AI, you might not see it as much because AI is taking our images, stealing our images separately. But in the past, it could be you took a picture, Coca-Cola likes it, and then they decide to run with it. Well, if you didn't copyright it, you wouldn't get. I think it's treble damages, three times the damages, if it's not officially copyrighted with the U.S. with the government, the federal government, um, with the copyright office. But at the end of the day, it's just it's to protect you. I mean, all of this, I know it sucks because it's like, oh my gosh, I'm so focused on legal, it's taking the fun out of being a photographer. I think that's why you hear those horror stories of like, again, somebody did this to one of my photos, or this client wants all the raws and this and that. And if you just outlined it in a contract, like you don't get raws, you can just point to that point and not have to argue anymore. They're not gonna do whatever. I mean, they can try to complain all they want, but at that point, it's like this is what we agreed to. If it's just one of those things where it's just like, well, I said this, and then they go, I don't remember you saying that. It's not memorialized. You kind of get screwed over that way.
Hmm. He said, she said, kind of situation, kind of thing, or at
I
least
mean, I don't. I mean, I don't know how much. Like, I know you have model releases. I think you have contracts every once in a while, right?
I do, but I'm just meaning more like it is better to have it written saying that this is the service I provide, and if you have any altercation to the photo, then you're crossing basically breach of privacy,
Yeah,
if you will. So that's just what I mean. And again, kind of like what you said, sometimes I'm usually fine. Like in fact, like someone asked me like, "Hey, I'm planning to make some edits to the photo," which sometimes like it's not even much. It's like I just want to change my face, if you will. I'm like, "Yep," and I just say, "Yep, you're fine to edit. Just please make a note of that in the comments that you've modified or edited the photo." To which, as I said, most photographers are pretty fine with that. Some can be a little sticklers, but though that is kind of interesting that you mentioned the fact about like removing your watermark. So is that something more like where if someone were to alter your photo, that you would request them if you're going to alter or change the photo, remove my watermark as well, or is that just something that is just add on? I just heard that and it kind of like struck.
yeah. No,
I just
I do ask that because it just depends. I think it's if it's just somebody goes, I want to liquefy my face, which I think everybody should be going around liquefying their faces. But if somebody wants to do that and my watermark stays there, I'm not gonna freak out about it. But I also don't want, like if somebody's doing wholesale changes to it, I don't want to take credit for those edits. So that's why I'm like, just take the watermark is just so for me, I don't I think there's two schools of thoughts on watermarks. I mean, some people are like, watermarks look good, other people are like, watermarks look terrible, and they're easily removed. The watermark for me is just to tell people that if you miss the photo credit in the caption, some people don't read captions, you can at least see it and go like, hey, that's Eric Jaw's photography, Eric Jaw's photo. If it's removed, they won't necessarily know that it's yours. But I also think, at least from my perspective, if they've changed it enough that it really you don't feel like that's the vibe that you're doing, for those images, then I think that's why I asked for it to be removed at that point. It's not that I'm like I hate your edits. It's just that's not my way of editing, and so because of that, go ahead and just you can leave it as like, hey, Anthony took the photo, but the edits were all me, and so that way there's nothing on a quick scroll by glance that you think it's my photo and edits.
So let's say, for example, because I have had this one time where someone I gave the photos to, and it's like, all right, it's like it's a character from Arrow or whatever, one of the villains, and I take the photos and edit them, but then they post the photos and it's clearly like exaggerated on like the Instagram like structure, like kind of like just making it more grungy or like really harsher contrast and darker to that degree,
Okay.
to which like I guess, and again, this is also back way back in like 2018, so this is still like my early days of photography, to which I'm like, whatever, I don't care. But I guess that could be like a good scenario there where it's like, all right, this is clearly way past of what I originally edited. that that could be a scenario to that where this is clearly you taking over and throwing non-link filters, but also clearly like adding much more
Yeah,
stuff that
from my perspective, I think that's legit for you to say like, hey, I don't want the edits to be ascribed to me. I mean, the last thing you'd want is the next client coming up and going like, "Hey, can you do that?" or "Don't do that, Eric, because I didn't like it." I mean, you could have it go either way, and if it's if it's there out there that like that's not my editing, then I think that that's completely 100% valid. That somebody should know about that.
yeah. So cool. So yeah, we kind of talked about, like, you did mention about model release forms. Is there any sort of other kinds of documents that are best for photographers to have? So release forms, maybe print licenses, any marketing media kind of kits or something like that. So what's sort of like a good base of documents that photographers should at least keep and ready to like send
Um,
out?
with the licensing stuff, I early on I had more of that. Early on in my cosplay stuff, I think it was a bigger deal to have licenses because I think cosplayers were doing prints, for cons and things like that. So for me, I would grant like where people were going out and printing out their stuff at, Walgreens or Costco when they still printed and things like that. I think it made sense to have it then when people were doing printing out stuff because, if you were a client, sometimes I would have clients going out and trying to print something and idea is if it looks pretty professional, and again, that's in the eye of the beholder, but if it looks professional to somebody working at one of those places without that little license granting, sometimes those places would be like no, and then I get a client saying like, oh, they wouldn't let me print out this image, and so I mean, it was a short one paragraph, two paragraph thing just saying, hey, this person, it's just so that way, the person at the counter there looks at it and goes, okay, well, it looks legit. They have the right to print this out. They're covering their own butts too.
Mhm.
Um, Printing stuff like that. Speaking of which, I do work with some cosplayers who are guests at cons who do prints, and I have print type of licensing for that. You can do. When I first started off, I was just like, I tried to do like, oh, I do like,
Percentages.
yeah, and it just, what? I'm not in the business of that. I'm sure there are some photographers who can do that, but I think most of us are just want to make the art and we don't want to get so encumbered by the business, but by the same token, we don't want to be naive not to do the business part. So it just got to be the point. Here's a flat. I mean, I think that's the best way. A flat um, fee, you know, and then you just what you think, and I think that makes the most sense for me. The flat fee. They just have either it's a flat fee. You print out as much as you want for the next year, um, or you print out much as you want for life. Whatever it is, you decide what is worth the value of your work with them is, and you go from there. And I think I found that works best for me, at least for some of the cosplayers that I know are selling prints of the work that we've done together. As far as marketing media, when you're talking about like those like a media kit or anything, at most for me, I don't think it would hurt for somebody to have something like that if it's especially now that we're in this digital content creation age of ours. Um, You can outline that in your model release too. I mean, in my model release, I talk about like, especially when if I'm doing there's collaborative boudoir work or like model calls where they pay like a reduced fee, versus like a private client for boudoir. Because of that, it's like, those first two instances, then it makes sense for me to be able to say like, hey, I'm going to use this for certain media for certain marketing, and you can do this for yourself as well.
Mhm.
You can look at like if you do OnlyFans work or anything like that, that you're getting into that. Instead of doing the print type of release, you're doing those type of things, and I think that they both apply. It's a little. I always and going back to what I said earlier, I think a flat fee is better. I wouldn't necessarily say that works for everybody. I just think unless you really want to sit there and track somebody's usage, and you're relying on a content creator who might also not be in the business of being a business, that I think it gets cumbersome.
Mhm. No, I've had that pop up a couple times where one person did like wanted to sell their prints, whether for a coffee or Patreon or whatever, and kind of like yeah, I kind of agree with you, where it's just like let's just keep it simple. The simple fee of you're allowed to sell this image for the next year. Even like someone like reached out to me saying, "So I know the contract is ending, but I still have some prints left. Is it right for me to sell?" And I'm like, and again, sometimes, or do I have to renew it? I'm like, if you're done with these, if you printed these prints like within the year for selling under your contract, I think you could technically sell them. It's only if you printed more after the contract, then that's where it's a breach or something like that. So it's like it is kind of shame to talk terms of that, but especially for like the 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 marketing kit, that was actually a question because that was something that did pop up for me literally like this last day or two because I took photos of like the Crown championship, to which
Okay.
I kind of, for lack of a better word, I was able to just get into the audience and bring my camera, and so I was asking like whether they had to pay for something for that, and to which it's like, all right, it's not exactly a paid shoot, so there's no contract there, but at the same time, like they said that it's just either their pamphlet that they send to conventions, whether they guest or something like that, and it's like, okay, I don't see too much craziness, to which I'm like, you know what? I'm fine with it being in your marketing kits or your packet that you send to conventions, to whether it be a guest or something like that. If you are selling prints, then we'll talk about contract. But if you wish to throw a little reimbursement for the photos, I would not deny that. So it's always kind of like those little bits of figuring out like that teetering negotiations or whatever have you.
And I think what you did sounds fair to me. Yeah, if they want to use, because you're talking about like a cosplayer who competed in Crown wanted to use photos that you took from like the crowd of them.
Yeah. Hmm.
And if they wanted to use it for like their next convention, like banner, like sometimes they'll take your pictures, use it as a
Banners
banner.
or something that,
Yeah.
yeah. Or
If
their
it's something
cosplay book.
yeah, if it's something tangible like that, like physical, then I could see going like, hey, yeah, if you want to use it, even though it's not a paid shoot, there's your flat fee for that image use, here's what it is. You could do that. I don't think there's any harm to that. But also, if it's like they're using it to just really market themselves, and I know it's weird for me to say that,
It's
but
that
like
line, yeah.
yeah, when they market themselves digitally, I'm just like, like I can do a flat fee for that. But, obviously, if somebody says I'll trade, whether it's clout or like viewership, we know that that stuff doesn't work. As photographers, that stuff doesn't work
Yeah,
for us.
yeah.
Um, and, and I think
Exposure
yeah,
as the
exposure, that's
term
what it
is.
is. Yeah. That doesn't work for us. So, and I think the reality of it is if the cosplayer is somebody who's kind of like, when I use the word professional, I'm like they've got experience in the community, and they know kind of like the ins and outs of like, hey, you know what? Everything we're trying to treat people fairly. I don't think anybody would balk if you were like, hey, you know what? $100 for your digital media kit, and that's it. For this image. I mean, it's like just because we're digital doesn't necessarily mean we should be giving our work away. I
Mhm,
mean, I absolutely hate that, when you do look on social media that, you know, the apps that we use try to assert that they have rights over it, but really they're only
mhm,
being able to say they're advertising Facebook or Instagram. They don't actually own my image,
mhm,
that type of deal. So I mean, but with what you're talking about, that's probably how I would have reacted too. Um,
mhm. No, perfect there. So yeah, as we were talking about, like, all right, so release forms, sort of like maybe having a template of print licenses. So what is usually the best way for people to handle to send these documents? I know back in the day it was a little bit more difficult. Like I remember there was like model release app that people could sign, but that was like right at the shoot. And there are some other like resources to be able to send templates or things like that, whether it's through Pixie Set, or for me, Honeybook. That's usually where I send all my documents. Do you have any like thoughts of like ways
I'd
for
say
people to do it?
Honeybook is a big one, like you said, because it's kind of built in there. That Adobe's got that what is it called? Adobe VeriSign or whatever
Oh, I
that
didn't even
is.
know Adobe had some stuff in that.
Yeah, they've got something where you can just do like a quick signature. I mean, you still come up with like a little PDF and then they sign it,
Mhm.
on your phone and stuff. Unless they took it away. I keep getting Speaking of Adobe, I keep getting their weird hey, like I completely forgot that they're switching from the you can buy the photography plan through retailers. You can only buy through Adobe going forward. Um,
So they're removing the retailer part now, or
yeah, because like the Adobe photography plan,
oh
at
yeah,
least
yeah.
the
Like how
$20.
it used to be, like, yeah, like, all right, you buy the plan, say for example, like Lightroom 6 or what have you, and you just kind of kept that program. Because I do remember that like transition where it was like a program that was just on my computer. I'm like, fine, I'm keeping that way. I don't have to pay for a subscription plan. But then they're like, oh, this program's now obsolete. Now you gotta jump into the plan. I'm like,
Yeah,
son of a gun.
yeah. So I've been using their subscription plan for photographers, the 20 gigabyte one, because I don't need their
Mhm.
cloud services. I've got plenty of cloud service elsewhere. And
I,
it's like
I
$10 a month or something like that. You could buy it, through retailers like Best Buy or other places. Sometimes at discounted prices when they had sales. Well, Adobe's eliminating that avenue, and they're just sticking with you can only buy through Adobe. And if you want that $120 a year photographer plan where you get Lightroom and Photoshop and Bridge, for that rate, you have to prepay every year rather than if you pay by monthly, it goes up. It's like up to $15 a month now, or
Mhm.
will be. So, but yeah, that's just that. But going back to, so I'm sorry to digress, but going back to how to get that sign, I'm a big proponent of paper still. I'm still kind of old school that way. Oh, if they could just write it out, it works for me. But sometimes I can't bring like like Fantastic. I can hand you guys all the paperwork I want because you guys are like a captive audience there. But like if I'm trying to be mobile during like con shoots or whatever, yeah, then I'll just do it digitally. Or I'll have them send it in advance, via email or what using Honeybook or whatever, and just have them return it that way.
Mhm. Not fair. It is kind of interesting how much resources are just more available now for photographers than there have
Yeah,
been. And
yeah,
honestly, again,
sure.
for those who want to use my Honeybook referral link, here, use this. No, no, no. But no, honestly, Honeybook has helped me out a lot, and just especially with the project managing and all that stuff. So, especially because of con shoots, it's like, all right, I got like 9 shoots going on and what have you. But anyways, I digress. I'm not sponsored by Honeybook. So anyways, I'm gonna take a quick little pause in terms of questions, and we're gonna do another uh blah, 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 blah. What's the question? Oh shoot. Explain that Graham here, to which I have a little photo here, to which I think this is probably your first cosplay shoot. Am I right or not?
Yes, that is
So,
back
yeah, if
in
you want to talk a little bit about
2017.
this, yeah,
Yeah,
2017.
yeah, 2017. So this is a repost of it at some point, but that was my first shoot. The model in question is no longer cosplaying; has moved on from cosplay. Uh, the interesting story about it was again I was doing
Actually, I was
weddings.
gonna say I saw them earlier this week at a barbecue. So, but no, it's just still nice chatting.
Yeah,
Hanging out.
I hope to get in touch with them, when I came back up there, but just it was all family stuff, a lot of family stuff. So I was jammed up. But yeah. So I actually I was doing weddings and like portrait work, like corporate headshots and things like that at the time. And for some reason I stumbled on Facebook onto what's that, Lon Todd's little Facebook, the was it
Oh yeah,
the
the Midwest
yes,
group.
yes,
Yeah,
cosplay and
we were
photography.
talking about that. We were talking about like his like group last episode. So how we kind of set up and how it's like the cosplay community scene was just so small back then, but then how of course it's like just grown post like not only
Yeah,
just 20,
yeah.
as I was saying, like there's always a surgence of like what I've noticed, like you have the crowd of people who joined in 2017, then you have the 2019, then of course you have the post-COVID people joining in 2021. So there's always like
Yep.
these waves of people just suddenly join cosplay, and you and I kind of
Yeah,
joined cosplay
and
in
obviously
20.
some people.
We were in the 2017 crowd.
Yeah, some people come in, some people leave, that type of deal. So, I saw Kitty posting on Facebook something about like, hey, it's gonna snow in a few days, like a random snow in March. Not that it's too random in Chicago, but just there's gonna be potential snow. She's like, anybody want to do a shoot? And I was just like, I haven't done this before, but I've been interested because I did do like stuff with like Wizard World Chicago before it became, like a few years before this, where I would do
Yeah, yeah.
shoot some cosplays and like when they had their in their line contest or just walking around the floor and shooting for Wizard World. I did it a few, so I enjoyed the cosplay aspect then. It just wasn't something I thought about doing formalized shoots with. I saw Kitty's post. I responded, I messaged her saying like, "Hey, I'd be interested," but then I go, fair in full disclosure, I'm a wedding photographer. You would actually be my first cosplayer, and so if you talk about interesting tidbit, I would not recommend this necessarily.
As a
Um,
first shoot.
yeah, well, I think part of it is like, Kitty and I would joke about it years later. Is like she's like, yeah, it's like stranger danger. You just went with a photographer out in the middle of the woods. You don't know this guy. All he said was that he did wedding photography. I mean, I had a website then, I still do. And I think that's the one thing that does kind of help you as a photographer is to, at least back then, was to you're making more of an effort, right? So I was like, check out my website. Let me know if you have any questions, that type of deal. We met up, and this is, I think, in Laval Woods.
Oh, nice.
I want to say that's what. Yeah. So it's there's there. It happened to just come down with snow real quick. I mean, but I think by the time we were done with the shoot, it was starting to melt. I mean, it was one of those
Oh,
weird,
damn.
freaky Chicago days. Yeah, but
Yeah.
she had this whole Snow White outfit. This was like probably like one of my, and it still is one of my best shots. I've attempted, I know photographers do that, go back and like re-edit older work, but I'm just like, you know what? Point in time, this is perfect for me. I like it. I'm gonna leave it as is. And from there, it was like it's kind of cool because like after that, it was like Kitty and I did oh, only a few shoots, I think, in 2017. Then after that, I mean, I think if you looked at my Instagram, you'd see
A
that
lot of stuff.
we did a lot of shoots together. But yeah, that's the thing. Prep wise for this, I brought out I want to say, was there any? Did I bring out any? I don't think I even had any off-camera lighting. I don't think I
Yeah, I
had
was gonna
any
say you're probably
off-camera.
getting a lot of like light bouncing off of the snow.
Yeah, yeah, just relying on the snow. I think at this point in time, I'm trying to think, 2017, I would have been DSLR, probably lower megapixel, nothing like today. I wasn't necessarily pixel peeping then either. Um, I was probably using my wedding lenses, so I wasn't a prime shooter at that point yet. So this is probably 24 to 70 or 70 to 200, one of the two, probably 24 to 70. I've always been Nikon, so I think what else about this shoot. I just know it was very cold. So again, for all the models that I've worked with over the years, whether I mean you've seen my feed, I've got all
Oh,
these
yeah.
outdoor shoots, some nude, some not, whatever, and they're all troopers for willing to pose in snow when it's freezing cold and I'm bundled up in, like parka snow boots, whatever. Type of deal.
Oh, fair, fair. No, it is kind of funny. Yeah, you did mention about like, okay, like meeting. I mean, again, like your situation of like meeting someone is definitely. I mean, again, yeah, meeting someone randomly in the woods. Like, I see like so many like sort of memes. There's like, my parents taught me to be better not to meet with strangers, and then it's like me as a photographer, I'm meeting someone randomly in the woods or something to that
Yeah,
degree.
yeah. Well, I mean,
But no,
part of that though is like, I mean, I think we've talked about it at length before. Is that you know, I think I know you are just like me. That if somebody says I want to bring somebody to the shoot, I'm like 100% do it. What makes you feel comfortable? As long as they're not,
mhm.
I just go. The only thing I respectfully request is that they're not like literally standing in there and you're staring at them during the shoot because you're not staring at the camera or taking direction from
or
me.
whatever directions. Yeah.
Yeah, or taking direction. Yeah, whatever directions that's going on. Um, I'm
Most of the time,
perfectly fine with it.
most of the time I just have that other person help me out with the shoot. Be like, all right, you hold the
Exactly.
light over
Yes.
here, or
Yes.
again, just hold this gear to something that degree. So it's like again,
We,
and it always like encourages the idea of like, yes, you could bring someone along. Just FYI, I might put them to work.
yes, I call them valves, voice activated light stand. I'm sure
Voice
a lot of
activated
photographers,
mouse.
a lot of
I've heard of
photographers do
human
that.
I've heard of human light stands, but never heard of valves. That's an interesting.
Yeah, voice activated. But because the part of it is, for me, it's like I'm perfectly fine with that. But the only thing that sometimes throws me for a loop is they're like, and I get it, 100%, I get it, and I'm 100% behind it. But like for my safety, and I'm like, yeah, but there's also a safety factor for me. I don't have anybody there, and I've got like $10,000 worth of gear on me. How do I know that this shoot isn't you and your group gonna mug me and take my stuff? Obviously, we don't want to live in a paranoid world like that. But I
No,
would
but you guys
never.
still have that concern.
Yeah, but so I would never say that that's the reason why you can't. It's just more of the. I think, you know, vet the people that you're going to work with. There are plenty of word of mouth referrals.
Mhm.
Back in the day when websites were really, really popular, that was a good way to do it. I mean, I think there's a lot of, letting people know that you're going to be on this shoot, checking in. No problems with any of that. I've had models before, like the live stream parts of it. So clearly, there's, that's just what it is.
Mhm. No, like, no, it's kind of interesting that you bring back about like not only is it something because there was a question about like how do you make the cosplayers or the talent feel safe or comfortable, which obviously I think we're kind of going into that question by Justin Pineda. Um, about like allowing them to bring a friend if they want to bring, but I guess it is kind of like that same bit of like it's not only just you're the concern of making sure that the clients or the cosplayer or model feel safe, but also you got to watch your back as well, because God knows I've talked a couple times where there have been a few times where some people have asked me to do boudoir shoots at conventions, to which it's like, I don't know you, I've never worked with you, and I don't want to go into your hotel room or what have you, to which I don't know who's in that room or who what you have in there. And it's like that's a more personal setting. If you want to do boudoir shoots, I'd rather do it at a studio location where it's neutral ground territory or something that degree. So it is kind of like that little bit where it's not it is kind of like go both ways of not only just the town safety, but also as photographers, we put ourselves at risk by just visiting and working with people that we also don't quite know either.
Yeah, and I think that that's legitimate, whether it's boudoir or not. I mean, again, we don't want to live in a paranoid world, but by the same token, there are plenty enough horror stories out there when things go awry that it's just better to be on the up and up about it and just keep it as is.
Well, enough of sort of like horrific or negative
Yeah.
thinking. Let's go to some positive stuff, to which I know Haley's been asking me to ask this question is, how many gunplas do you have left to build? Or can you at least explain to the chat what gunplas are?
Yes, so that is, I think, that's an amalgam. That's a combination of plastic. It's plamo, but it's plastic models. So Gunpla is, if you're a huge, Gundam fan, like mech suits, big robots, um, whether it's Transformers, what have you. Gundam was like one of the early ones in the 70s. It's this entire universe. And I want to say around the pandemic, I got really into it at the beginning of the pandemic because, we're all locked inside, not doing anything. So I started buying kits, but then, during the pandemic, things were shutting down. So kits were going up in prices. So then you start, oh, I'll buy this for a rainy day. And I do have a Sazabi I do have those two kits. I haven't put them together
Perfect.
yet. I'm just looking at the chat.
No, the perfect. No, that honestly, that's perfect.
Yeah, but it's what my backlog right now. If I pull up, I've got a spreadsheet.
You got a spreadsheet. I love it.
Yeah, because let me. I don't. I want to say I have. I think at the height, I had probably, I think I shared pictures of my backlog with you
I
guys
think
every once
so.
in a
I
while.
think so. Or at least I've seen
It was
them,
like,
the boxes in the background. You've
yeah, yeah,
got
it was
your
just
old setup.
boxes. Yeah, and
Just
I think
boxes.
I'm like at 120, 130 backlog kits. I actually have not built one in since we moved down here. I moved way too many boxes. My wife and I joked that we have storage partially
For
for
just a
my
books.
gunpla because, like, I mean, I've got like moving, but like large U-Haul moving boxes, probably like seven or no, probably like a dozen of them in our storage just for that. I
Just
actually have,
storage.
like we just came back, even in Chicago, we just came back, and then I saw this at Hobbytown up in Hobbytown, USA, up in Chicago, and I just like,
Oh.
oh, I'll just bring this back with me, and it was kind of annoying to try to figure out how to pack it properly, like bringing
I
back
mean,
photography gear at the same time.
there's a bit where it's like, yeah, sure, I guess that makes sense. Like, don't build them yet because they're secure in their boxes, if you will. So it's like, keep
Yes.
them with the boxes, so
Oh,
it's
and then just like as we're culling photographs, it's like me trying to cull my backlog. So I mean, there's a joke, on some of the Facebook groups that I'm in for Gunpla. There's two type of collectors: the ones that collect the backlog and the ones that actually build the kits. I'd like to think I'm in both, but right now I'm really on the backlog side just because my kit building since we moved down has, again, I'm still settling in. I mean, you can kind of see like my background right now, and that's not even complete in terms of like my little man cave-ish area. I've got probably maybe 8 kits built in a display. Otherwise, yeah, it's like, then you get into, it's like there's like this meme out there that was fantastic. And somebody did it's the one where the guy's like, hey, come and visit my room, and it's like showing all his different hobbies.
Mhm.
And then his friend asked, well, you're showing me all the hobbies, but you're not showing me the output of the hobbies. And he's like, well, my hobby is having a lot of hobbies. And
Yeah.
I feel like I'm in that mode at the time, with whether it's 1/6 scale figures. But I'm getting focused. Like for instance, for my I'm only building certain grades, which are sizes. That's like based off of the
Mhm.
scale. I'm
Yeah.
building like master grade only, and then I've got high grade kits that are just it's a smaller scale, but only from this particular series. Master grade only from a particular era, in the Gundam universe. Just because I was buying kits from every different series that they had, and what have you, and really not being focused. So I'm hoping,
Mm.
like I sold some off, that now that my backlog's down into the 120s or whatever, that I can start building. I probably will never have enough display room for that, but especially if with our potential, our trip coming up this
That's right.
fall, I might be coming back with a suitcase full of it. I mean, I
I
know,
was gonna
like,
say, especially what you told me, I'm like, oh yeah, that's
yeah,
dangerous territories.
one of the tips are take them out of the box, flatten the box, just pack them, like flat. You can pack more. Um,
Oh my god.
no, we'll see coming back, if that's the case for me, but yeah.
No, it is kind of interesting because I was listening to a friend's podcast, to which uh he cuddles with them. Where are all of them alien one? They're just texting me on the side just about, my reaction to all this. But it's like, because I have not watched Gundam. I know about it. I know about it. But like again, I was listening to my friend's podcast, to which he and his brother were talking all about Gundams, and they were sort of talking about Gunplas in that aspect. So it's like there is like a little bit where it is kind of interesting, fascinating, like the culture of this mecha and how it is kind of like the original mecha, kind of like that a little bit there. But it is kind of perplexing. I do love the idea that you kind of compare, building Gunplas kind of similar to photo editing. I That is a facet that I never kind of considered, but
I mean,
it's no different for me, like talking about, like, all right, when I photo edit, it's kind of like cooking, if you will. It's like I can either microwave this photo edit, like throw a preset or whatever and done with the day, or if I could take my time, cook it, if you will. So it is kind of that is an interesting analogy right there of like your backlog of like, all right, I got photos to work on, but either I'm working on these sets and I got so much. I kind of that's an analogy I never thought I've ever heard of, but I love
Yeah,
it.
I mean, the only thing the only difference between that and my photography backlog is that I won't jump from kit to kit like I do on photo editing.
Photo editing, yeah.
Yeah, because kit's
Which
just like you just do it and you finish it. I mean, you might like if you're painting or something or airbrushing, you might
get that
and
like
that's
dry time or something like that.
yeah, then you might start another one. But for me, it's just like, I do it where it's like, like how the analogy for me for photography is like, when you're editing a set, you kind of want to keep it consistent um, in terms of tone or vibe. I'll build my kits in a series. So I'm like, okay, I'm collecting the five, suits, the five mechs from this particular series. It was like, Gundam Double Z team, and then I'm going to build them all in a row. I know some other builders don't do it like that, but that's just how my mind works.
Mm.
Where I'm just like, I would recommend if you get a chance though to watch it. I don't know if it's on Netflix. They do, because it's
Maybe
like
Crunchyroll. Maybe it might be on
Crunchyroll
Crunchyroll.
might have it.
Might. I don't know.
I know
I'm in
the
the One Piece wormhole right now.
oh,
So
okay, so you're stuck there for a while. You're stuck there for
I
a
mean
while, then
I'm
yeah.
766 and I'm trying to see if I could reach 1,000 by
Oh,
August. So like I'm hoping because that'll be my 2-year mark of in this wormhole, if you will.
okay.
But
Because
anyways.
with Gundam, like the series, the one that I recommend, and that I think most people start off with is what they call the 1 Year War.
Mhm.
That the original one in the late '70s. Uh, it's very, like you can watch it and people will be like, "Oh, I'm just watching it for the mech suits," but it's really, it's a reflection of Japanese culture on being anti-war. It's a huge thing
Is
about
it Mobile Suit Gundam?
yes, Mobile Suit Gundam. So
All right.
it's like
That
50
is on
some,
Crunchyroll.
is it 50 some episodes?
Probably. I don't know. I'm just kind of quickly glancing. It's kind of weird where it's like it locked me off on my web browser here, but I mean they always ask. Give or take, yeah, let's see, 14, 42 episodes.
Sounds about right. Yeah. So for those who don't have the time for that, they did do basically uh condense some of the episodes, cut things out, make three feature-length movies. Right.
Yeah,
And that's why I
yeah,
was saying like
movies.
it was on Netflix at one point. I don't know if it's still there. But it cuts out some maybe filler episodes or some sillier moments. But you've watched enough Japanese animation to know that like some of the subject matter, even though the
Mhm.
characters are youthful, it's it's adult subject matter.
The
But
idea, yeah, no. And
yeah,
again, that's what I've heard, at least in my friend's podcast talking about that. So Juan did have a question, particularly in terms of this question of Gundams. If you could pilot a Gundam, what would be your model and weapon type? Because I did hear about there are sort of different weapon types, whether it's close range, long range, or what have you. So
I would do the new Gundam, the RX. I think it's RX 93. It's
mhm,
basically in Stars Counterattack. So Amuro Rai is the like the protagonist. Regardless, he's got this really cool suit. So there's the original suits known as the Granddaddy, the RX 78 2,
mhm.
Granddaddy Gundam. And then eventually he's no longer the protagonist because they move on with series, but they bring him back for this feature length movie. And he's got this really cool Gundam in it because part of it is these pilots, they're called new types.
That's
Basically,
right.
in
Yeah,
in the future
I
we're in
heard about
space
this.
and some of us have the ability to almost like use like a six it's not like a sixth sense or our whatever an aura.
Psychokinetic
Yeah,
or something
yes,
like that.
exactly. Kind of control to augment. That's why your reaction time is faster in these like the new type pilots, the suits and what have you. That's probably my favorite one just because he's got all these uh fin funnels. I mean, I've got a actually let me go grab it real quick. I'm gonna show you because it's an awesome
Fair,
kit.
fair, fair. No, honestly, the stream's going pretty good, nice and chill. Let's see. So yeah, we did go through some of these questions of here as I'm looking through. I think we'll definitely go into more of how to plan during the shoot and hopefully move into the cosplay retreat stuff. Ooh, let's see what we got here.
All right, so this bad boy is the one that I think I
Oh,
would
geez.
want to pilot. So, it's a pretty tall mech, taller than the Granddaddy, I think by like 5 or 6 meters. Um, yeah, it's just like I said, like this gave rise to me. And I think that's what it is. It gave rise to the big robot era.
Yeah.
So, this is a special coating one, so it's like it's got a little sheen to it, but
Everyone is mesmerized by the figure. Haley's like, I'll take 20.
yeah. So this is
Uh,
like this. I forget how long it took me to build this particular kit, but yeah. I mean, actually, when you were proposing like questions or topics that you're going to talk about, it got me thinking. And so I might be building a kit, cracking open a box and building a kit in the next few weeks, just because it's probably time to get back on that horse.
Yeah. And again, that's always like one thing which that's always like what I'm always curious about is like photographers of not only like what they photograph, but what do they like to do on the side? Because God knows is that bit where it's like photography is not always our life. We have lives outside of photography. So
Yeah.
like whether it is just me doing cooking, riding my bike, or taking care of my cats or whatever, or just playing video games. But it's just that little
As I
bit
say,
of
you saw me the other day. I just finished up Ghost of Tsushima.
oh,
I
that's
just
right.
I
That's
found
right.
Yeah, I finished
No,
that
literally
up,
when
and
we
so
when we did the tech rehearsal, yeah, like I just saw on that TV in the background there of
yeah,
just Ghost of
yeah, no,
Tsushima. I was like, wait a
yeah,
second, is that Ghost of Tsushima there? To which I'm like,
yeah.
which are you
I've
excited
this
for?
the Ghost of Yatai or whatever that
Yeah,
is.
yeah, I'm curious
Excuse
about that.
my Japanese. I don't know any. It's terrible. But yeah, I am excited for it. After I finished, finished Tsushima, I was just like sitting there going, "Do I want to start up a new game now or not?" And because I've got a backlog. My life
No,
is
same.
backlogs.
No, same.
Also,
I got a list
yeah,
of video games as well where I'm like, it was kind of funny enough. I was like in a bit where it's like, all right, finish this game, so I'm gonna start Borderlands 3. But it's like, actually, no, I want to play Doom Eternal because I got the game, but I never finished it, and I want to get it done for Doom Dark Ages. Oh wait, they put Indiana Jones on PlayStation. I'm gonna grab this and play this now. And then it's like I just literally was watching some episodes of South Park. I'm like, actually, I want to replay South Park Stick of Truth or something like that. So it's like that little bit where it's like combination of like I want to play new games, but I'm like I want to replay certain games or something like that. I was like, oh
yeah,
my
yeah.
god. And I was
It's
telling Anthony where it's like I do have like a replay of Ghost of Tsushima, which I started back in 2022 when I got my PS5, and it was, and again, it's fun to do, and I'm playing like the new game plus, but it's like I should beat that before the new game comes out. So either way, but
and
no,
that's the rabbit hole, right? I mean, it's one of those things where you like, after I finished, I thought to myself, do I want to start another game? And I'm like, I've got other things backlogged that I maybe should take care of. It's like, I don't know how you handle it, but I sometimes have difficulties when I'm like, okay, I got to stop buying games because I'm not going to get to them for years.
mm,
Um,
no,
I still buy
I
the
have
game.
I have a solution that my folks thankfully taught me is that I
Okay.
buy if I were to buy a game, it has to be like one game per month. So like, and how I equate it is like, all right, so say for example, PS5s are like $70. That is my cost limit of video games for that month. And
Okay.
whether if
For
I
for
meet that
all platforms.
for all platforms. That's just something
Okay.
I tell myself. So of course, Steam, they always have discounts. So it's like, all right,
Yeah. Yeah.
if it's that bit, we're like, okay, I'm technically going underneath that 70 mark, but it's like, all right, well, I'm at least keeping a good financial budget. And albeit even though I play more console games than Steam games, it's like something that is still there where it's like maybe this could be good for a stream or something like that. There are a few games I have bought, but especially for console, like that is where I mostly chill and play games. That either, as I said, I have my list, and as I said, the $70 limit, if you will, kind of helps me curb the impulse to buy. And God knows, it's
I
like I
might
want to
have to
get
do that. Yeah, I might have to
I
do
have like
that.
there's like so many games I want to play where it's like Claire 33 or like Obscura, whatever that's called,
Yep. Yep.
33. That's
I
on my
picked that up,
list.
and that's on my backlog already. But
But there are some games where I'm like, I'll save this. If I suddenly want to impulsively buy it, I'll buy it. Worst case scenario, I just have it as a birthday wish list or something like that. And God knows, like my sister gave me like Mario Odyssey, Tears of the Kingdom for like my birthday, and yet I have not played them. So, but it's like I know I will play them, but I just God, there's so much right now.
And you know what bugs me for those is it's like I have, multiple platforms, right?
Exactly.
To play on. And it's like you can't I know it's not making them money if you do it, but it's just like I am buying games on multiple platforms because I'm like, oh, you know what? I might be, like Witcher 3. It's like, oh, I might be on my Switch, but I had it originally on the PC. Then I got a Steam Deck. And then it's like, oh, but I don't use it as much. And then it's like, oh, but PlayStation, I can do it
Me
there
and
because I can
Balacha
play on
right
a
now. I have it on like
yeah.
4 different accounts right now, or four
And it's
different
ridiculous.
devices.
I don't mind, not that I don't mind. I mean, I sometimes berate myself for it, but it's fine if I have it on multiple platforms. I just wish we had cross platform saving.
Or
If I yes,
cross cloud save. I think that's what you're
yes,
saying, because I know Witcher has
yeah.
it. I think Baldur's Gate has it, to which I have it on my PC, and yet I have not touched in a while. But I'm like, I feel like I'm more inclined to, even though like it is on my PC and I could play here, but I always associate my PC here for work, for photo editing. I don't know. So as I said, it's just that little bit where I was like, I wouldn't mind it being on a console, but I was like, I don't know. Sorry, I'm just diverging a little bit here and there. But so anyways, no, that was a good little sidetrack of gaming and gunplas and all that stuff. So let's get back to photography here.
Yes, yes.
So we talked a little bit about preparing for a shoot, and especially what was kind of good with the transition of talking about like the legal aspects. So let's talk about like planning, or actually during the shoot itself, and particularly
Okay.
like when you pack your bag, what gear is in your bag, and besides your camera, what is something you never leave home without?
Oof. All right. Well, now that I'm traveling back up there to do a lot of the shoots, whether it's for Life Fantastic or for when I pop into town, I've found it's much more difficult for me now to bring everything that I want. So I'm a little more diligent, or at least a little more um, making more concerted effort on what it is. I do know. I mean, I ended up buying like a couple of Pelican Air cases. One for carry on, one for checked in, just so I could make that trip. Those type of trips.
Mhm.
I'm able to bring, like for when I just came up recently, there's a couple of light stands, one softbox, small, like 34-inch beauty dish. That's a big thing for me. I still do a lot of off-camera
I was gonna
lighting.
say, is this checked bags or carry on?
Camera stuff, all like camera body lenses,
All
anything
carry
with like
on.
anything with a lithium ion battery, carry on. I've got my little portable smoke machine now.
That
I've
has to be
got
checked. That's got to be checked.
yeah.
Awesome.
Oh no, actually the portable smoke machine I carry on because it's got an internal lithium ion battery.
Really? Huh.
Yeah, it's like
I
that little smoke ninja. Have you seen the smoke
No,
ninja?
I know what you're talking about, but I
Yeah.
guess it's no different from a vape pen. It's just that you can't exactly use the vape pen
Yeah, yeah,
if
yes,
you're at the
exactly.
airport, or obviously on the plane or something
Yeah.
like that. So
Oh,
no,
it's the
I guess I kind of was thinking it almost like sort of like something that sparks or ignites, and I feel like that would be more something that you would check in. But okay, no, that does make sense.
yeah, because they're
It
they're
is
concerned about the battery blowing up in the cargo hold type of deal
true,
for those
true,
lithium
true.
ions. So that one, and then I've got one of those. I've also started trying to do the for at least for some boudoir the single source light. I've got that like that little hobo light. I don't know if you know. Um, yeah, let me
I
grab
could
it.
search this up, or I'll search it up.
Yeah, yeah. But I've got one of those, so they all fit into this like Pelican carry-on that I do bring with me. So I bring I'm more of a prime shooter now on photo shoots.
Okay, I think I have an idea what you're
It's
talking
like
about.
it's a hobo light, uh, hobo light micro bicolor LED light.
Or how about this? You search it up and share it on your screen, because I do have your screen up on here.
Oh, okay, yeah, I just drag it over here.
Okay. Oh, so that is the
Uh,
same thing I kind of searched up.
yeah,
I wasn't sure.
yeah. It's a nice little portable light. It's got, like barn doors, some
Okay.
filters, that type of deal. So because like, I don't know about you, but like for like even the like
And
the
so this is
Godox.
continuous light. It's not like a flash,
Yes, that's
correct?
continuous. Yeah, it's not a flash. So
Okay.
I'll bring one flash head. I'll bring like a
Huh.
Godox 8200 or something like that in my carry on. Well, just a battery. The flash body I'll
Yeah.
put in the check-in because it's empty. Hobo
Huh.
light, smoke machine, that all goes in the carry-on. Couple prime. I think this last trip I brought 3 prime lenses because I'm primarily prime now. At least for boudoir and even for cosplay. Just the three. I have I think I brought like 35, 50, and 85.
Mhm.
Um, that the checked in was like a couple light stands, a continuous LED light in case I needed it,
Mhm.
and then a lot of like props that I might need for the shoot,
Mhm.
or sometimes like costuming, whatever. To answer your question of what equipment I absolutely have to have though, ish, you mean besides the actual camera itself?
Yeah.
Oh, I would say that it's my 85. I have an 85 1.2,
Okay.
and it's a tank. It's a ginormous lens, but it produces probably, especially when I put a Pro Mist filter on it, um, for the boudoir stuff that I shoot, probably some of the most gorgeous images, especially when there's some ambient light source that hits the filter right. I mean, it's like whether it's at night or during the day, you just get um some of those effects that I can't do myself in Photoshop, you know.
Mhm.
But that's probably what I would need is because I can always step back with an 85. Well, just to a certain extent, but I think that's what I would be. It's that if you're not talking about strict camera part, like a lens or a camera body, I think the one thing I could not give up would be what would I pack?
Deep in thought.
I can't think of anything. I can't think of anything beyond that. I
No,
mean,
because it is kind of interesting where even
yeah.
like I'm packing for a shoot tomorrow. It's like, all right, I got my checklist. Like, all right, camera itself. I bring. It is kind of funny enough where I switched between back and forth. Where it's like I started with like my variable lens, then I sort of switched with prime lenses, especially because I was trying to do natural light. But then as I switched over to flash and strobe stuff, and even though I try to use prime lenses, it was always awkward during shoots trying to switch lenses. And with the client there, that I'm like, I'm just gonna, if I'm doing all strobe stuff, then I'm gonna do variables. So it is kind of interesting where, as you were talking about having your 85, which I'm not denying 85s are very good, especially for like any good zoom ins or crisp looks for primes is always good. And again, I think that's probably good for studio settings, but especially for conventions, I feel like I always got to bring, variable lenses just because
Yeah, yeah. I
location,
think
location.
if I was doing con shoots, I would be going back to zooms.
Mhm.
Maybe one prime just for like portraits, but I agree with you wholeheartedly that I do have that luxury doing boudoir where it's some posing, you just kind of go flow through a bunch of poses and things like that. So having switching lenses isn't as much of a deterrent for the client, you know.
Yeah, to agree there. So again, you kind of mentioned about that you've been using continuous lights, but that's
Yeah.
just more for like your travel stuff. But locally, you kind of still do flash, or is
Off
that right?
camera, but yeah,
Off camera
I still do
flash.
the strobes. Yeah, I still do the strobes.
Has there been any times where you try like do natural light, or have you? Because as I said, I've been in that battle balance myself where it's like, all right, when do I use? So like, say for example, this photo I'm editing where this was natural lights because it was like, all right, a little bit sun peak here and there. So it's just that bit. It's like I've been trying to challenge myself, be like, when do I use natural light versus certain settings? And again, it could be location, could be the type of mood. And even tomorrow, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna bring flashes, but I'm like, do I need to bring flashes? Because I don't know whether to keep it natural for this cosplay shoot. Or, I don't know. So, do you lean more towards flashes or natural light? I suppose. I know I kind of took
Um,
a tangent there.
I don't know. I mean, I think I bring a strobe just in case. That
Yeah.
and a softbox. Sometimes on a shoot, then I'm just like, as I'm shooting, sometimes the wind takes the softbox a certain direction. I'm like, you know what? I don't need it anymore. I'm not going to go try to adjust it because I like for instance, this shot that you're showing. If you told me that it was off camera flash work, I would have been like, oh, because you've got the ambient down, but the model is well lit. That I would, that's kind of like what you would shoot like a high noon, where it's like, hey, let's bring down the ambient, put a strobe right in their face, and those are great shots. So I mean, like, I do think that the balance is good. I think the natural light gives you a little more mobility. You're not trying to chase around, walk around. But then obviously you've got the struggle of as the sun shifts, depending on how long your shoot is.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're losing, or like even just like let's say if you wanted to be, I'm gonna do shots underneath the bridge. I don't know if you could. Then it's like obviously it's a little more difficult relying on natural light for something like that. I always think having it in my kit bag, having a strobe is that's why I do like the Godoxes, like the 8200s. Um, just because it's
I've been Westcott
portable.
lately because that's been
Yeah.
helpful.
So yeah, I mean,
Well,
like
fun
just having
fact.
that. Yeah.
Well, fun fact. Before this shoot, I was doing like a shoot with a Todoroki, and we were. But unfortunately, as other people who went to ASIN this year know, that it was extremely windy, and so I do have like my was it Peak Design tripod, to which even though that's usually used for like do camera stuff, I've been able to modify it where I could keep like uh my light on it, and then it has like a hook underneath where you could like throw like a bag or something like that. So like I kind of
Okay.
use like my camera bag as a, for like by word, a sandbag, but it's also light, mobile, easy to pack in. That's been kind of great, convenient for shoots. But of course, right before this shoot, I had the light stand set up, and of course, like I forgot to put the camera bag underneath the stand, and of course, guess what? The wind
Wind took it.
shifted, the wind took it, it knocked over, to which, to be fair, it was also a very old cheap umbrella. It broke the cheap umbrella, to which I already have like an umbrella softbox that connects to the light itself. So it's like which I don't usually carry for cons just because it's just awkward and bulky to carry. So I use the umbrellas. But it also broke the bulb of that light as well. So it was like right at this point where I'm like, all right, I gotta use natural light. And then the other shoot I had afterwards, which was underneath the parking garage, I did have my speed lights, thankfully, ready on hand just to be able to cover that rest of the part. But I was like, all right, I was thankful enough, like it was partly cloudy, doing all that kind of stuff. So as I said, it's kind of like that little bit of like things occur, bad things happen, and yet you improvise, you do your best. To which follows up to my next question: was there ever a shoot where things went horribly wrong or didn't go as planned, or couldn't believe that happened? And what were you able to do to recover it? Because as I mentioned earlier, things just happen, and we always gotta like go with the flow, kind of like think on the spot right there. And IE, that was like a perfect example where I'm like, I knew this, we're gonna be on the field. Thankfully, it's partly cloudy, and this kind of fits well without having to use the flashes. But even though my flashes broke, we're just gonna go with it. So, is there a story that you have that kind of like
I
to tell,
guess yeah. I mean, I would imagine like like the models we work with, I never see us in our panicked, flawed state.
or we just
But
keep it inside and trying to
yes, we
keep
could keep
calm?
this the sweating on the inside. Trying to think if was it did it have something to do with there I had a shoot and for some reason I could not figure out like this is back in DSLR. Like with DSLRs you can change the crop factoring. At least on Nikon, you can.
I believe
And
so. Yeah.
so if you got full frame, you can step it down. You can go down to crop factor. You can also go to like other types of. For some reason, I ended up shooting in I think oh my god, I think a 4x5 format. Like I was like, what's going on with these images? It's like it's not framing properly. It was actually on a shoot with like it was like a two models doing like a cosplay boudoir thing.
Hmm.
And for some reason, initially, it was really frustrating me. And I could not get the damn body to go back to your typical go ratio, the 2 to 3 ratio that we have on our DSLRs and mirrorless cameras. And so I just said, okay, you know what? It's weird 4x5. I just have to go with it, work with it. Um, I mean, I think that holds true for anything. Like if it starts to go awry, if you start showing they'll panic. Your model's going to be like, "What the heck's going on?" And
Hmm.
it's going to reflect on them. I mean, I think the images turned out great. Luckily, I had room to work where I could go better framing, by backing up and everything. But all of a sudden, it's like my 35 wasn't acting like a 35 because I'm like, why is it so tightly zoomed in on them? Or like my 85 was like focusing like just like literally on an eyeball when I'm like, that should not be an eyeball shot only type of deal. It turned out I just put the setting at some point without thinking about it when I was going through the menus. Then somehow
Yeah.
I got stuck there. I think that's like one occasion. The other occasion was, I think, similar to yours, where I'm trying to remember which shoot it was, but lighting and everything, and I didn't bring my trigger.
Oh,
And
yeah.
this was just like, what the heck? So I ended up using like, I luckily I still had a reflector, like one of those 5-in-1 reflectors, like a smaller one. I had a white T-shirt that I was using,
Oh,
kind
you
of
used
like
your
as like,
T-shirt as a
yeah,
reflector?
I guess
What?
bouncing and stuff. But I felt terrible because I'm sure the model at the time was like, "Okay, why don't you just pull out your iPhone at the same time and just make it completely like seat of your pants type of stuff." I mean, I think those images ended up coming out well too. Um, and I've worked with the model since, so it's not as if like they use it, it was a knock against me. But it was one of those things where it's like you have a list, check it not twice, not 3 times, check it 4 or 5 times to make sure you got like I don't know how I misplaced not bringing a trigger on a shoot. And it's not like one of those things where I could like run back home. The studio,
No, yeah.
the studio had, I think, triggers for use, but they're not keyed into my, they're not using the same uh flash heads, stuff like that. I just like
Yeah.
forget it. So
No, well, it's kind of funny enough. Like that did happen to me on a shoot where, but I did have the trigger with me, and
okay.
so like I have my older Westcott trigger, but then I have my second Westcott trigger, which is like okay, the newer model or whatever. And I was using that. And in fact, I covered a wedding with that trigger. For some reason, during this one shoot I had, for some reason, it just was not working. Like I could click it like on its own, and the flash would work. But then whenever I connect it to the camera and try to take the photo there, it would still not trigger. I was like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on. And I'm like trying to do the shoots. I'm like, all right, do I do this all naturals? But then I kind of thought of a clever idea because of how some speed lights you can put it on the hot shoe, put it on your camera, and then it could be the control power of your
Oh yeah.
light. And so then I was like, all right, I'm just going to use you as my remotes, just either keep this one down low but then still be able to control the others or what have you. So as I said, it was just that little instinct of like, all right, what's a good compromise for me to work on this? So no, it is kind of funny. As I said, you just got to think creatively. And even then, like, in fact, I need to send that trigger because it's funny enough. This year has been a bad year for me with a lot of technology or just mechanical stuff breaking. Where it's like, all right, my fridge is broken, my oven's broken, my car is broken, doing all those payments, and then of course, in fact, these headphones were broken, to which I had to deal with like a 2 month RMA just for me to get these back. Thankfully, with Westcott, which was nice, where it's like not only did I send like I did have this speed light that smoked up on me during a shoot. So I thankfully sent that in. They're like, yeah, we don't want this quality of our products. They sent me not only a new speed light, but that speed light included new batteries to which I could like literally plug in a USB-C and it charges them. I don't need to have like those charging mounts or whatever. So, but
That's nice.
so it's like I need to do that for like that trigger there. But I digress. But as I said, just it's one of those other things where I'm like, oh my goodness, with technology acting up. But no, back going back. So as I was mentioning, I did have a shoot after this one that did require some speed lights, and I did have like my actually the new speed lights, as I said, as I mentioned, where I could like plug the battery in and it charges, and then I had the older model to act as a second light. And for some reason, I was like trying to test it. I was like, "What's going on? What's going on?" And like, all right, I have this flash on. What's going on? And then I realized it's like, of course, it's like some little button I hit on the trigger that switched it from manual to some setting. And I'm like, all right, let me adjust it back to manual. And like, works perfectly. So I'm like, it is always like the minute details of like
It is. It
things that
is.
just really gets to you.
At least you saved yourself on that. I did have an issue once where I don't know if I was on the wrong channel. Maybe I couldn't get it because I hadn't used the and at that time I had like it was at the either three strobe setup or something, but on the trigger I had switched it away from manual,
Hmm.
and I don't know if I put it in either TTL or something, but regardless, I was no longer able to independently control my strobes, the intensity, and it was ridiculous because unlike you, I didn't recover from that particular one, and I just went no lights at that point. Um, and I don't think that one ended up the way I wanted it to.
Hmm.
But yeah,
No, fair. So before I go into the our next search subject question, there are a few open questions I do have here. So you have worked with like a number of genres. So you mentioned you've done wedding, you've done, as we're seeing cosplay, a little bit boudoir glamour. What's a subject or genre that you've never done but you've always wanted to try to get into?
I'd like to get into or would
Would
conceive of
like to,
getting
I don't know, or just try out. Because again,
astrophotography.
That's kind of funny enough. That has been a common one that I've seen a lot of people say lately. I think.
I mean,
Yeah.
I just bought a Newtonian, like an 8-inch Newtonian telescope. We've got better lights here. I'm not living in downtown Chicago, out in the burbs here. Bought that, and then it's kind of gotten me to think about like, hey, you know what? I want to spend a ton of money to shoot
The stars.
galaxies, nebulae, that type of stuff. So I think that's the one area I think I wouldn't mind exploring it. I just don't know if my wallet will let me explore it with all these other hobbies.
Yeah, I've only dabbled in a little bit of astrophotography. Like I know, like when there was a blood moon back in 2015 or 16, I remember like I took a photo with my telescopic lens, to which that was not enough. The other one was at a certain location very up far north, to which it was kind of interesting trying to do the concept where it's like I'm thinking, all right, I know we need to do a long exposure, let me get the stars here zooming in, and it's like I don't know what's going on, and I remember let me zoom back in, and then like I had like the tree lines of and that honestly like helped give like that little better perspective there. And do you want to know where that location was?
The Washington Island?
Yes, it was, which transitions to our next question here. See, look at all these transitions. So, yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, you host a number of cosplay retreat weekends, for lack of a better word. Or was that the best way to describe it? That Light Fantastic is a cosplay retreat weekend or
Yeah,
photo
yeah.
shoot weekend?
I think it's fair to say it's more cosplay themed oriented.
So, like, I suppose, like, yeah, because it is something that is different compared to like, all right, it's one thing to host like a meetup at the locations to which I've talked with, you know, my cos meetup person, coworker, I suppose, in a way, Raptor Photos as well as Von Tog. But it's one thing to like organize sort of like a separate event at a location that's off. So, what kind of inspired you to start hosting Light Fantastic?
I will thank some of my Canadian brothers and sisters. There was a event that they had pandemic. Um, Randomly stumbled upon it, but it was called Mountain Cosplay Retreat. Uh, I went 2 years, and then it pretty much ended. The organizer moved on. She had other things, another business that she was focused on at the time, and so the organizing just got too much for her. But 2 years, I went up to British Columbia, and then we went to. Then the following year was Alberta province. Um, both times, woods, Canadian Rockies, uh, just incredible scenery. I remember coming back after that first year, thinking to myself, like, man, I would love to do something like this down and where we're at, get outside. Cause I was doing con work and stuff like that. Thought about getting outside. Um, and so I did my first Light Fantastic up at Antioch, but it was kind of like unofficial because it was like, no, I think it was like just me. It was actually just me, 6 or 7 models. I had a theme. It was a Disney theme. Went with that. They had, makeup, stylist, all that. So it was a little more project-ish, but I called it Life Fantastic. The following year, I was like, look, I got to get outside because I had come back from I think I was getting ready to go to the Canadian one. I was like, I got to get back outside. Um, Ended up doing it up in Wisconsin, but in the Dells area. Then after that, I think this would be year 7 or something like that. Uh, the genesis of it was from that mountain cosplay where it's like it's not just outdoors like at Lincoln Park, or and again, no knock against Chicago and its
No, no,
outdoor space.
no worries.
Just like I wanted something where I'm like, hey, you know what? You've got this awesome Warhammer battle armor, or you've got, at the time, like something from World of Warcraft, whatever that belongs in an epic outdoor setting. Let's get outdoors. Just because some of the shots that I had, I mean, like you've got like, Nami and her, League of Legends, full on mermaid sitting in a lake with mountains behind her. I mean, that's what I got up in Canada.
Oh,
I wanted
right.
something like that, down here. Um, Fortunate enough that there was, good interest, strong interest from people to come up there, spend. Initially, I think the first time outdoors, Life Fantastic wise, it was like I want to say it was because the Canadian one was usually you get there Friday, you'd have Saturday and Sunday, leave Monday or something along those lines. So it's like 2 days worth of shoots, 3 days up there. I kind of did that for the first year here, but then I realized that's not enough time. It grew from that, where it was like you have shoots starting, people arriving on Thursday, shooting Friday, Saturday, Sunday, leaving Monday. And then I think in even like the few years that you went, people were arriving Wednesday and then doing, you know that some of the unofficial shoots on
Yeah.
Thursday. Yeah. But I think it was just a great way for people to, for me, it's like passionate cosplayers, passionate photographers wanting to make art. And my biggest thing was always not necessarily doing things to get views at a con. I mean, I had cosplayers telling me like I would never cosplay this, or at least wear this cosplay to a convention because nobody would know what it is, or it's like it's not. There's not enough, whatever clout that I can get from it. And I mean, obviously, I think it's. I don't know if it's toned down a little and how much people seek it, but this is like we're talking about 2018, 2019,
Yeah.
and again, it was one of those things where I like that. The idea that you cosplay what you wanted. I wanted to make it about the cosplayers. That's why one of the rules that I had for photographers who joined the event was, again, you don't get to dictate the cosplayers do for costumes. Cosplayers might throw out a bunch of ideas at you and you can like go like, hey, I like this, I like that, but I didn't, because I heard it enough at cons where it's like, oh, I wanted to book a shoot with somebody and they say they only shoot this, or I wanted to book a shoot with somebody and they don't shoot that, and like I don't have a shoot. And it's like I felt, for me it's like, wow, like why would you, somebody's putting their sweat and tears into a cosplay and somebody doesn't want to shoot it because it doesn't match their idea of like what they want to shoot. Well, this is what I was hoping Light Fantastic could do. you have an OC that nobody wants to shoot, or that you don't think anybody wants to shoot, bring it up here, and will be a photographer assigned to you to shoot it. No, they'll shoot it with you. And I think that's part of the whole vetting process that we did. Both cosplayers and photographers is I wanted everybody to be open-minded about what they could do, sometimes on the spot collaborations or what have you, but fostering that atmosphere, for people to be able to make art, in the cosplay community.
And I think that's kind of nice where the cosplayers can vet the photographers where they can choose, albeit like sometimes they might be like, at least in my experience, it was like, oh, I mean, I'm down for this, I'm down for that. What are you interested in? I'm like, I'm interested in that. I'm like, all right, that's cool, kind of do. But then sometimes they might know, like, all right, this photographer I know is good with this kind of aspect, to which like I remember, or this photographer is a fan of this. So like how like I think what was it Uzu Kaz or 66 Kaz. I know they changed the name a little bit. How like they booked me for like that first year that I did Life Fantastic, and we did like Huntress from Dead by
Yes,
Daylight.
yes,
So
yes.
it's like kind of
That
like
was
that
an
little
awesome
bit,
shoot you had. Yeah.
and I'm excited to like I'm inadvertently bringing like a 31 days of Halloween of like all the Halloween horror shoots I'm doing. I'm like, okay, I gotta bring this back. If I'm rechanging my format, I'm gonna do something fun with it. I'm like, oh, I gotta bring, because honestly, yeah, it was kind of fun just doing like a whole horror shoot and all that aspect there. But as I said, it was kind of like nice to like, all right, there are some characters where some person did ask me to, they wanted to shoot me or shoot with me with this cosplay. I'm like, all right, then I gotta do my best to prep and work it, if you will. So, but I think what's kind of nice where, as you kind of said, where it's like it is out of the location. It is like, and again, as much as meetups are nice and they are good, quick collabs, but that's what they are. They're quick collabs. While, these retreat weekends, it's like, all right, you got the shoots and you're outside of the norm. You're not having to be like, all right, I'm dealing with, people around with at Lincoln Park or maybe LaBa Woods or what have you, but it is like in some unique locations or what have you. So it is kind of like interesting to like go out there and go to unique locations, which I think that is just something because everyone, whenever like some people want to do shoots, like, all right, what are some good default locations? Oh, LaBa Woods or Waterfall Glen or uh Fullersburg Woods. Like those are like default locations I think of whenever someone wants to do it wood shoot or something like that. But at least, as I said, it is just something that can set something different out in the area, if you will.
Yeah, and I think
And-
the at least the environment I feel like for Life Fantastic is that when you get up there, you have those scheduled shoots, but then there's the open time for collaborative shoots of like just randomly like, hey, what are you doing? Like I know like when Christian was there, he was like he brought up like I think 8 different like looks, and he was
oh
just
yeah.
like, I mean, he's scheduled for 4, but I think he shot all like a lot of them,
Mhm.
not all of them. I mean, just a couple years ago, I think the Juan had a shoot. He found a cabin, that was occupied, and we just
Oh
kind of
yeah.
peeked in there, and next thing you know, he's doing a bunch of other shoots there. I mean, I just think that type of stuff is what it's like all about.
Or was it like how I found that, for lack of a better word, the woods of lost time, like
Oh yes, with
that
the crazy clocks
all the
and
clocks, and then suddenly like I find this and everyone's like, I want to shoot there now. So it is kind of funny
yeah.
where, especially as that was a nice repeat location, where it's like everyone found like little details, little things to try to do shoots on, and again, to each their own, like to that little bit there. And again, like I do want to like try like take Nicole, my girlfriend, up to Door County, because Door County is a nice area as it
It
is, but
is. It
Washington
is.
Island
Yeah.
is, I wouldn't have thought, because I'd never really been up there myself, and it's like, oh, I want to visit there more, I want to hang out there more, whether go to Al Johnson's or to see the goats standing on the roofs
Yes, I mean
or
that's
what have
that
you.
the
It's just like the
breakfast
fun
meal that we
experience,
all have.
the fun
Yeah, no, I mean,
experiences. Yeah, no.
I think that would be a great trip for you guys to get up there to check it out.
I think it is kind
Yeah,
of nice where it's like it is just not focused, because again, usually, especially with meetups, where it's like, All right, yeah, you do shoots. Maybe there might be some after meetup hangout where we're all getting like food at the local restaurant or something like that. Or sometimes, again, as usually the case, I'm tired. I want to go home. But I think what's kind of nice with yes, it's like there is a bit of that. For lack of a better word, it kind of almost seems like camping spirit, whereas like you're making bonds and friends with people that weekend and just the memories of it, whether it is like D&D night or the camping or the was it the barbecue grilling master that
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was cooking all the burgers.
Yeah, it's very
And
difficult for me to do the grilling when you're not around. So
I mean, there's not much to it, but so it is kind of good that again you have Colorado plan, which is going to be a new location, new ideas. Because I remember you mentioned how like Devil's Lake was a little bit more of a hike, while Washington Island was kind of nice, where you had a central
uh,
location to move around.
yeah. But but remember, like I mentioned to you, so Colorado will happen for 2026. So the
Hmm.
idea is 2026. This year we'll probably be back up September around that Devil's Lake area.
Oh, so
I'm not
you're
going to go
you're
as
doing
far.
you're doing
Yeah,
Devil's Lake this year?
yeah, I'm going to do Devil's Lake this year, not
Okay.
Colorado. So that's going to be next year for Colorado. This year, just logistics wise for me, it'll be probably Devil's Lake in September. I think after you, right after you guys are on your trip. So unfortunately, I don't know if you'll be able to make it.
We'll
Um,
see.
yeah, but again, it's one of those things where I'm trying to find the right spot. I want it to be near Rocky Mountain National Park. So there's a couple of spaces that I liked, but I'm also trying to keep in mind the budget
Hmm.
for people traveling because it is now it's a bigger ask,
Oh
for
yeah.
people to make time because it's a 2 day drive from Chicago, and I know for cosplayers that's the issue is like you can fly into Denver, but you can only bring so much. But then if you're
Yeah.
driving, you can bring more, but then you're driving for 2 days, so it's like a caravan.
Logistics
What are we
of it
talking about?
all. Yeah.
Yeah. Because as far as photographers go, I think it's a little easier for us to
Oh,
be
no
more
doubt.
mobile, and so trying to keep that in mind, trying to find a good spot that's not outrageous, and keeping in mind the weather because it's September weather up there is not the same as like when we're I think in Wisconsin. It's not terrible. I
Yeah.
mean, I've been up there in September, but when you're adding mountains and things like that,
Mile
maybe
high
this year,
mountains. Yeah.
yeah, maybe this year it actually kind of worked out, especially with the reduction in ranger staff. Who knows?
Oh, yeah. No, fair, fair,
Uh,
fair. No, but if yeah, so going to like one of the questions I believe Alex Poison Rose cosplay asked was, what is a dream location for a cosplay retreat? If money or timing wasn't a worry, or I guess government stuff, if you will, what would be like sort of like your ideal dream location? Rockies is still a
uh,
great location, but now
yeah,
that
yeah.
that's in the plans, like what's the next step? What's the next step? Everyone always wants to know what's the next one. So if
I
you
guess
had no
I
worries.
yeah. If I actually I would have three spots. I know you're asking for
Hmm,
one.
I mean, go right
I,
ahead.
I would do Canada. I would probably do maybe
Mm,
British Columbia again. Again, that's the true mountain cosplay retreat. I mean, not that Colorado isn't that. There's something to be said about photography as creatives in Canada is that how we're talking about like you go to Ball Woods or whatever, you might have people like going, "Oh, what are they up to?" and just kind of staring. I mean, I've been on shoots where somebody holds up their darn cell phone, standing off to the side, and just taking a picture, and it's just like, "I find you really should have asked, but whatever, right?" Um, I think in Canada that your people, the people kind of might just like look and move on if anything, but just the fact that there's they've got 1/10 our population that you're not running into people when you're out in the middle of nowhere
mhm.
doing shoots. um no, you don't have to sit there and work. I mean, like, back in the day, when smoke grenades were like the craze
Oh
for
goodness.
photography. Huh. you could pop them up there and nobody was going to say anything. Down here, I'd worry like, oh, can I pop into this public park or somewhere nearby without like somebody going like, you're not supposed to do that
Yeah,
type of deal, you know? And I'm not saying that
that's
you shouldn't, be safe because you are being safe, but it's just like, certain permissiveness. So the Canada's one. I would love to do Hawaii.
ooh,
But my
Hawaii.
my fear of Hawaii is we're not doing shoots. We're just gonna all go out there and hang out, which is fine too, and maybe do one shoot per person.
It's
The deal
gonna be a
because
whole weekend of a beach episode. We're all doing
yeah,
beach
exactly.
shoots, if you
You
will.
go to you go to some place like Kauai. Kauai you can do like that the island of Kauai. You can do waterfalls, mountains,
Yeah.
rainforests, beach. You've got all that stuff. So I think that's a great spot. Now the third spot would be and I think it's kind of taken up already, more international, because I wouldn't mind not necessarily an urban setting, but just something like whether it's castles or like ancient Greek type of structures. So whether it's
Uh,
Greece or, but like when I say it's kind of taken up, we've got there's a couple of international cosplay events. Lisa was that the
hmm.
one that was in Poland last year.
Pixelmania. I think FX
Yeah.
Sammy was in Il
Yeah.
Volta. I think that's the Italian
Okay.
one.
So that's the Italian one. So those have really great locations, but for me, it's like those. Like I was gonna go to Pixelmania pandemic year, and I remember even thinking to myself, like friends were asking, like, "Are you still gonna go?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, it's in August. Pandemic will be over by then. Then we'll be fine." And that's why I'm not an epidemiologist. But again, it's one of those things where it is what it is. I never got a chance to go there because I was gonna do like an Eastern European trip off of that, so I haven't been
Dobry den,
there.
jest. Jak się mask? Dzień dobry. Jak się mask? I don't sorry.
Yeah, so no, I was gonna say like that's where I would something so either Europe, or I actually might even rescind Australia. I'm not Australia, Hawaii, and say like like New Zealand would be a great spot.
Yeah.
Um, those are you're starting to then run into this similar nature but very nature setting. So I don't know. I mean, but any of those, I would love to do any of them. I think Canada would probably be cost and travel wise the least
Hmm.
prohibitive. People who have passports be able to go. Flying to Canada is not as expensive as flying to Hawaii.
Oh yeah.
Not as long. So
No, fair. So no, that's kind of cool. It's always good to think of ideas and just have aspirations. Now, the other question from Alex is that I'm just gonna follow up with is how long is your hair now? Gotta throw these fun little questions in here. So
she's already seen it. I thought.
I know, but
I,
well, again, I can't recall if she asked this before seeing you or after. So it
okay.
could have been one or the other. So, but either way, because that has been something that your hair has definitely been a little. You just have been growing on it. And a follow up question: any personal hairstyling tips from me?
Oh yeah.
Because like God knows the girl has been asking me like, oh, maybe you could grow your hair out. I'm like, I don't know. It's like I get fidgety with my hair when it reaches like past like the length of my fist or something.
Well, first of all, it's some people think it's COVID hair. No, I had started growing this out late 2018. So by the time
Mm.
COVID hit, um, I had my COVID hair already in place. Maybe I knew about the pandemic, but the longest it's been, and I just got my hair cut maybe 2 months ago. I want to say,
Oh,
or trimmed.
so it's been. I
It
was gonna
was
say yeah, definitely trimmed.
yeah. So I took 6 inches off of it, but I think I want to say now it's below the middle of my back. It was down to my butt before the trim.
Oh,
So like right now, I would say yeah, it comes to like you know here-ish. If you can kind of see where I'm.
so kind of like to belly button, a little higher than
Yeah,
belly button, give or
yeah.
take
Yeah,
length.
it's pretty long. I keep it up most of the time. Hair tip wise, conditioner. It's
Mm.
conditioner. I keep it. I don't style it. Like I was at a wedding when I was up in Chicago, so I did add a little hair product to it so that the flyaways wouldn't go crazy or anything. But I just keep it pretty much tied up, in a bun. Sometimes I do braids, or my wife will do braids for me. I can't do braids myself. Um, I usually try not to keep it just long and flowing unless so much because she doesn't like it. She thinks it looks I look bad with it long and flowing.
Oh.
But like her concession is like you can have long hair, but you just can't have it like long. And I will say that it does get hot in the back of your neck.
Hmm.
You do that.
I
That's
know.
the one thing.
There's like one photographer I know who does have their hair grow, and they're like, oh god, yeah, just the amount of maintenance or whatever you gotta do for it. And as I said, it's like I've contemplated. I haven't had my hair long since college, but that was also like 3+ months of me before like going to like my home barber between college, if you will. But it's like, I don't know, something to that little degree there.
I think you could. I think you could pull it off. I actually think you could pull it off because I think long hair on men looks especially good with a beard.
Mhm.
That's kind of like
I definitely know
thing
I've
in you.
been trying to grow the beard a little bit more.
Yeah, I think
I've definitely been
it
growing,
will
especially the
put
salt and
age
pepper
on
look.
you.
True.
Will put age on you. It will make you look a little older.
Hmm. I mean,
I mean, the beard's already doing it, but the hair is going to make you, look even, Rip Van Winkle-ish if you're not careful.
I mean that hasn't stopped me before. God knows when I was a freshman in high school, people thought I was like a freshman in college or something like that. So let's be honest, like I've been told I look older than I am in my life, if you will. Um, so do you, if you don't mind, do you want to take a quick 5 minute break just to run to the restroom or something like that at all? Because we are
Yeah, that
reaching the
works for me.
2 hour
I might
mark.
actually grab my dinner off to the side, and
No, no,
you might see me bending over periodically to eat.
no,
5 minute
no,
break
perfect.
works for me.
No, no, so sounds good. So yeah, we'll take a quick 5 minute break, everyone, and we'll be back to continue on with the questions. So don't go anywhere. We'll see you guys in a quick little bit. Okay, I think we're ready. Are we good? Let me switch back over. Oh, that's a full screen right there. Let me switch back over. Cool. So we're back. We're good. I'm like, do I ask another question about? Actually, yeah. Let's do a explain that gram, just to switch things up a little bit here. So let me get another photo pulled up here.
All right, I'm gonna take a bite of
Twitch.
food off camera real quick.
No, that's fine. That's fine. That's perfect. As I get things set up, because it's kind of interesting where I got duplicate on this screen here. So I have this image here as after we just talked about Light Fantastic and imaging, and I definitely know this was a question that was posed earlier by Haley, especially since you are self-taught, is especially with photo editing. How do you? Ooh, sorry, I'm just smelling a lot of spices from from my girlfriend. Excuse me, cooking right now, and I'm just like, ooh, got me right there. But yeah, so do you want to talk a little bit about this image here with slimy frogs on this Princess Mononoke cosplay photo?
Yes. So that's a big composite on my part. Trying to remember. So I was trying to look up the actual original image here. It's just me walking through the woods up at what so is that Life Fantastic, walking through the woods. I had it in my mind at the time, like, oh, we're just gonna do something a little atmospheric. Um, Mononoke's got the whole wolf thing going. So I
She
was
got
like,
the
you know
wolf
what?
thing going.
So we're gonna try to do an image of that, and I want to see if I can find the original with it. But
If not,
yeah,
don't worry.
so when I shoot composites, this is my work. But when I shoot composites, I come into it generally most of the time. I can't put a percentage on it, but there's something in mind already. Like I'm going to composite this because for me, after the after the fact makes it a lot more difficult because you're missing out on things potentially. I try to get what I need there, at least in terms of posing angles or whatever, and then I build in the elements. And this is back in 2021. This type of composite work was just, I mean, here's the this one is the image.
Oh, do you
It's
have it
not
up
even the
on your?
raw.
Do you have it on your screen?
Yeah, I have it on my screen right
Okay,
now.
all right, perfect. All right. Now I got your screen shared. So all right, I'll switch it over.
But this is what it looks like, with some slight slider work on it through Lightroom. Um, if I reset it, you'll see that's what it looks like. It's in the woods. So I mean, this shot today, if I were to get this, I could still do it, in a. I would edit it still, but maybe not necessarily as a composite, but just I mean, it's got for me atmospheric. I like the framing with the trees and everything, so that's why I would run with that. But when I did this shot, I was like, I want it to be like a nighttime thing, so I turned day into night for the shot. I've done that for a few shots that and again in my mind, I'm like it would suit, and then it just basically they're going to the whole. Okay, I got to get wolves in the image. I think I want to say I bought some stock image of wolves. That's why I say when I do my
So
composites
you
again,
bought the images? You bought the images?
well, the wolves themselves, it's like somebody digitally rendered wolves. These are digitally rendered wolves. So there's like with there I don't know what's the site called
Because that's always been a question. Because I do try my best to composite images. But sometimes, like either I do have them in mind and I try to pose them. Otherwise, like either I might just spontaneously be inspired by them in the moment. But otherwise, like for me, it's like I either find like PNG files, resources. God knows I try to definitely use the Photoshop generative stuff, and it's always a lot of misses versus hits, if you will.
Mhm.
So it is kind of interesting. So this was this digital artist specifically making the
Yeah, so
composites for
they're
this?
selling yeah, they were selling it's basically I forget which site it's on. It's one of those Envato.com. So they've
Okay.
got like assets for whether it's web pages, photography, video, what have you. And this was like before we had this huge AI, and as you mentioned AI, rush where it's like everybody's doing prompts now. So we have that. There's that difficulty. Like you can do PN. These were like I believe they were PNG files, but basically there were wolves digitally created in certain positions. So you
But
could either still manipulate them.
they were designed and created digitally for this
Yes.
particular image, correct?
Not for this image, just as like a you want a wolf pack. We're gonna make I'm gonna
Okay.
make a bunch of wolves.
Okay.
Um, so that's why I say it's like stock photography in that sense. These wolves were this digital creator's stock photos. But you buy the images, and then you can use it in a work. So at the time, I was like, well, no, somebody's gone through this effort. I like the way these wolves are rendered. I'm not going to try to render them in like Blender or some 3D program for these. And I agree. I do. Sometimes when you're doing like a Google search, you can find PNGs, but sometimes they're hit or miss on quality or whatever. So for some of these, I was just like, I'm going to go with this because this was a big deal for me. So these wolves are rendered. I masked it in Photoshop. That's why I go like when you were asking, like, Haley goes like, the whole learning on your own. I still do a lot of my stuff old school, like rendering wise. Not
Okay.
rendering, but masking. So like layers, layers, masking stuff in and out. That's why it takes me like I'm sure there's more efficient ways. Like even selecting. I know
Okay.
that there's a select tool. I don't use it as much because I'm self-taught. I don't know like how like here's all the these are the layers that went into this thing. Um, but it's like for me, it's just easier for me if you see like I've masked like her out. Like I've got left wolf, right wolf. With all the adjustment layers that I added to it because the image was just this. And trying to get it to look like it fits into my thing,
Mm-hmm.
I have to change it.
Yeah.
For lighting. For me, it's like trying to get there's this moonbeam coming down to a certain extent because it's night, a little more ethereal. Again, so that's why I go like it takes me a little longer because I'm masking things out when I do it. I'm sure there are photographers out there or even digital editors who will be like, dude, you're just doing it absolutely wrong. And that's I think why I kind of mentioned at the beginning of your stream that like in terms of like taking continuing education type classes, I wouldn't mind doing that for like Photoshop to learn some of these things. And I mean, I've got subscriptions to Flern,
No,
that
Flern, yeah.
Photoshop. He's that photographer up in Chicago.
Yeah. Oh, wait, he's in Chicago? I always keep forgetting he's in Chicago.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's in
because like I
Chicago.
know I have the 30 days. All right, I'm gonna switch back to our because I think you're sharing on this, so I'm switching back to both of our screens. Yeah, because like I do love Flern because especially at the 30 days Photoshop was very nice, especially
Mm-hmm.
during the pandemic, and then now he's done like 30 days of Lightroom, so it's been kind of nice
Mm-hmm.
there of that term there. So I did not realize he was from Chicago. So our
Yeah, I ran him
I know, like,
one of
was it
my
Manny Ortiz was another photographer, YouTuber
Chicago
that
base.
is in
Yeah,
Chicago based. So I did
yeah,
not realize they both were. Holy
yeah. No,
Toledo, holy cow.
yeah, no. For Florida, I ran into at my gym one time. I was like,
Oh, in your
wait,
gym?
this. Yeah, I was like working out. I was going. I'm like, he doesn't normally go to my gym, but I'm like, that's the guy that I see on my Photoshop tutorial videos all the time. I didn't
Yeah,
bother.
it's
I
just
didn't want to
like
go over, and go like, hey,
photography
what are your
techniques
thoughts?
or something like
Yeah,
that. Yeah, no, you're
hang it.
just saying like, hey, are you this? I'm like, oh, I'm this. I'm like, oh,
Yeah,
nice to meet you. The
yeah,
usual
I,
meeting celebrity banter, if you will.
yeah.
I know, because it is kind of interesting where I've learned a little composite editing because I did take an internship with a post production company, and
Mm-hmm.
there were like some little things where like, and again with this when I had an internship with them, they're like, all right, you make a basic edit, and then they slightly try to train you into like doing like After Effects or albeit this is almost 10 years ago now, so like, and of course I've moved from video editing to photo editing, but there was like definitely little aspects and things that I never thought about or considered into my edit. So one of the edits was, all right, you're trying to put a composite on a LCD screen, to which of course like on the LCD screen during that filming of the commercial is just a green screen. So like, all right, you're supposed to put the image there, but then it's like, but wait, the countertop is like a granite or something like that. So you got to put
Mhm.
the image on the granite itself. So it's like it has to make you think one or more than what you're supposed to think. And again, it's kind of like that aspect where that was like some basic of like, all right, compositing that I never thought of, where it's like, all right, you got to think beyond not only just adding the effect into here, but how does it affect on the shadows of this? How does it do the lighting of that? And trying to make sure that the lighting matches to this degree. And again, there are times when like I do look at images, I'm like, this image is clearly this is clearly PNG file that is placed that does not throw a little effect onto like the surrounding area or something like that, or just as I said, it's just literally thrown on, but nothing to do that. So as I see, you have an image pulled up already.
Yeah, so that's what I was gonna say. Like that's why I think, for most photographers, composites work when you pre-plan it. You do it after the fact? Of course you can, but that's just more work on your part. Like pre-planning, I knew I needed this particular image of Ricky that I needed to throw
Mhm.
this flame on her face. So this is me with a red, continuous light off to the side, lighting up her face to kind of simulate this heart flame thing that she's doing, right? With her
From
her
Fire
character.
Force.
Yeah. And then in her eyes, look at her eyes, not below. Look at her eyes, please. I can zoom in.
I'm trying to look, but I'm also waiting to see you zoom in.
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm
I
trying to
see.
get
I see what you're doing. Are you trying to throw a little reflectiveness
so then you
into the
see the
eyes?
heart reflected in the eye.
Oh,
So
that
that's
is
when I was saying at the beginning where it's like we spend hours doing something that nobody will probably ever see. Um, I spent time
nice.
to put those because I'm like, well, if you've got an image off to the side, it should. I mean, just like you can see clearly there's some lighting over here. I think that's probably my softbox on one
Mhm.
side
Yeah,
reflecting
on
in
the
her eye.
left,
But I'm like,
on her
you
left
know,
side, yeah.
yeah,
And
but
then
I'm
you
like, I
probably got the
needed
speed light on the right
this.
side, yeah.
Yeah, speed light on the right, and then I needed that. But like I said, for this particular image, most people aren't going to be looking there um, to see it. But for me, I knew that that's what I wanted to see,
The subtle
and that's
details to make
yeah,
it real, if you will. And again, even
yeah,
like one of my shoots that I did have this at Asen weekend was a Todoroki, to which I was like, all right, I want you to do a flame effect, like hold your, because again with Todoroki it's like one side is ice, the other side is flame. So it's like, all right, I'm gonna have your hand up on the flame side, but again I could just have the person just hold the image with the flame effect, or just hold it and be like, all right, I'll throw a flame effect. But it's like, no, I gotta throw that um lighting glow. And originally I threw in a red gel effect. I was like, no, wait, that's not correct, this does not feel right, because again flames are usually orange or yellow, so it's kind of like that
yeah,
little bit there. So it is kind of interesting where it's kind of like that like thinking where it's like, all right, I do have this key light on me, or even I don't think I even used a key light. I think because it was like natural light, I just threw in a speed light just to throw that little splosh of red or orange on their side, just to give that little glow, if you will.
yeah, yeah.
So it's
And
like
that's why I
those
said
little
like,
details.
and that's if you've got some pre-planning going, or when you think about it, I think those are things that maybe other photographers will pick up, but the overall image for the client, a model, whomever, or just a regular viewer of it, they might not pick up on it, but it lends that credence of like, hey, this could exist in reality. I mean, that's the reason why we do say like practical effect. Like I'm a big fan of practical effects,
No,
even
great.
in like
Yeah.
in movies versus CGI. So like even in my own photography, I mean that's why I said like I've got that little smoke ninja thing because yeah, you can get PNGs that simulate fog or dry ice or smoke or what have you, but there's something to be said about when it's actually like in the image of the one that I was editing with Gina today,
Mm.
where it's like,
Oh, I think yeah, the Lucy
yeah,
in the
where she's,
bathtub,
yeah, Lucy in the bathtub, where it's like
but it's
literally, I
also
mean,
like
that,
she's a little computing heating coolant and needing to be in the bathtub to
yeah, and,
try to
I mean, that's
for
just,
lack of a better word,
that's just,
cool off.
Yeah, and that's just the fog machine back there. So can you do that? Can you get files that do that, or even a brush? You can brush that in, but it's like
It's
I didn't have to
easier
worry
when it's
about the
in there.
yeah. I didn't have to worry about the lighting because obviously
Or
you've been here where they've got the cross beam lights back here. You're like punching through anything that you have.
well, no,
You know, you're
well, as I said, this was the shoot that, as I was saying earlier, that my light broke, and so I did have, and they did actually have a smoke machine for this. So I haven't edited the images yet, but just like that little effect of like, all right, some
yeah
steam popping off here and there, but just like that little extra side light obviously is helping out a lot more to that degree. Just
yeah
and again, it's like and again, it was like, all right, we're definitely doing this on location, not inside, like the convention, or especially in the Hyatt,
yeah
just because of just for smoking reasons, if you will. But God knows, yeah, it's like I know it was kind of funny enough. I did see sort of like I forget if it was 2022 or 2023, because no, it was probably 2022, maybe 2022. Because fun fact, like with my work, there's always a filming convention that occurs, and of course with my company and my work, we of course have to have a booth there for our products of lighting with Cineo, which is
okay
and I remember like popping by like a booth that was selling. I don't know if it was the Smoke Ninja or it was some sort of similar product to the Smoke Ninja, but it was just still something cool. Actually, that might have been 2022. That was 2022. I think I saw that product where it was like, yeah, that smoke effect, or like kind of like had that little nozzle, and like literally like it had like that smoke effect coming off literally off my skin or something like that. I'm like, ooh, that is so cool. And I'm like,
yeah
imagination of like having that right for shoots. And there are definitely some people I know in the cosplaying community that either have that smoke ninja or they sometimes use it, but it's like that same person like, I do want to get it, but I'm like, it's always that balance of like, am I gonna really use it? I don't know.
yeah yeah. No, I mean,
It's like,
oh, I've done it with cosplayers before when I especially in Canada one year. I didn't have it then. I had a bigger smoke machine, that fog machine then, so I couldn't bring it up there. But
oh yeah.
one of the cosplayers was a vapor, so I had him standing off to the side. I don't do that with. I mean, as
No,
much as they want
I
to
mean,
volunteer, it's like they're gonna knock themselves out, like pulling in all that nicotine and everything. So
no, there has been a few times where of like, yeah, that has occurred where it's like I can smoke something. I'm like, all right, you sure you're good? I'm like, I mean, we'll
yeah,
throw it. No, it is surprising like how much of the vaping community like can contribute to the smoke effect of your
yeah.
shoots. So no, that's kind of fun and crazy right there. So we do have a couple of open questions I have here. So let me see. So what is something about photography that's the most challenging part for you, if you will? Like
Most
something that you struggle with in photography.
um
I think we kind of answered
periodic
this.
bouts of imposter syndrome.
Imposter syndrome. Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes I sit there and I'm like, this is not. No, I mean, I think there's something to be said, like, at some point you have to let it go, right? Let the image out into the wild. And there are times when I sit there and I'm just like, how many hours am I putting into this? And I think that ends up being, it can be a detriment.
Hmm.
You are too caught up in like the light thing and some light in somebody's eye or
Hmm.
whatever. It's like, what's the overall image? Is that I think that's more important. Sometimes I forget that. So I think that's the thing that's the most challenging for me, like mentally, is that just at times I just have to learn to, I'm done with that image. It has to, the
Hmm.
imposter syndrome shouldn't be kicking in. I mean, I think we all have our natural doubts about in the creative community about what we're doing. There are
Hmm.
times when I sit there and I'm like, yeah, I'm not sure. I think that probably explains my hiatus this past year, but at least my reluctance to start anew again down here in the Dallas area, just because again I really miss all you guys up there. Um, and coming down here, I'm sure the community is probably strong and vibrant down here too, but it's just like, oh my gosh, I gotta start all over again, when I've got
No,
that
and
comfort level and I don't have as much potential imposter syndrome or whatever you want to call it, or self-doubt, while
no,
I'm working up there as I do down here. So
no, and I kind of learned that as well, like because I have been traveling to a lot more cons out of state, and it's
mhm.
like that bit where it's like, all right, is that bit where it's like, especially the first couple cons, like I'm gonna try to make it big, but I was like, yeah, I'm definitely, for lack of a better word, no one compared to like all these others who've definitely established themselves over these years visiting these cons prior. So part of me is like, I know, like, all right, whatever stuff in the Chicago area, whatever people identify me, it's like, all right, I got my image there, but it's like, all right, how do I spread my name or what have you into other areas? And again, it's that little bit where it's like, all right, I'm going back to the basics like I did back in Chicago. Well, I'm not saying back in Chicago because I am in Chicago, but
Yeah.
but you know what I mean. When I started my scene here, it's like, all right, let me just start with the basics, like I did when I went to cons. So I'm like, I'm just gonna go do lobby photos, and albeit like I remember like when I took photos at Holiday Matsuri, like just random lobby photos, some of those people became clients for my C2E2 shoots. So it's like, it's kind of interesting where it's like you branch out and you just do simple stuff in some areas, and it connects back to even whether other locations where this person booked me when I did Katsu. I was like, oh, thank you so much. And then they booked me for his shoot at C2E2. So I was like, okay, so it's kind of like that's little branching, those little things to just, for lack of a better word, like weave the network, if you will. Though I will, it is kind of interesting where it's like, yeah, it's like, all right, I'm in a new location. How do I start branching out? And albeit there are some not only photographers but also like clients or talents I know that also like, I miss Chicago, I need to go back for whatever. But it's like that is a challenge, I feel like. And again, I cannot say on my own part, given that I am just been in the same condo for the lack of almost 10 years, even though I've had to convert this space that was a photo studio to now my editing slash second bedroom. But it is that little bit where like, yeah, we kind of like try to pivot it a little bit here and there. Um, so
Yeah,
is
I was gonna
that
say
how?
that yeah, I was gonna say like that's why down here I'm not the intent when we came down here, even the place that I'm at now, it's a house. I'm not shooting here because I
Mm,
did that at my place in Chicago, and I kind of wanted to get away from that, just because I knew, I think partly the pandemic helped because at that point all of a sudden it's like working from home. Everybody's like working from home, so it's not like I had that luxury of free space anymore. Like to do shoots, whenever. So I kept that mindset coming down here.
mhm.
And I think, going back when you mentioned Katsu, that's again where that kind of kicks in for me. Like for a host of other reasons, but like I think one of the big ones is like, yeah, like when I saw that you went, I was like, man, I could not do that because I don't know if it's not that I, like being like, badass or whatever. It's just a matter of like, how do I approach
Mhm.
people like I did in the past? But now that I'm 7, 8 years on from that start, at a con and go like, hey, I'm going to grab a shot of you. Here's my, do you want to look at my Instagram before you agree to take pictures with me? To have me take photographs. That you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
It's that whole vibe, and I was just like, oh man, I don't know if I could ever really do that. It's something like, especially like a Katsu, where it's like I'm like, oh my god, like all the photographers that whether it's I'm inspired by them or I follow them because I love their work or whatever. And I'm like, oh my gosh, or the cosplayers that are there. I'm like, yeah, yeah, for me, I could never find a reason for me to make it
Hmm.
out there as one of the reasons why I couldn't.
I guess I did have a question. It was like, what's been your hardest lesson you've learned on your photography journey? But I guess that almost translates into that question,
Yeah, I mean,
right?
trying to overcome that feeling at times that I'm not good enough for it.
Hmm. No, it is that boat where, especially for me, where it's like, yeah, as I said, it's like it does put a different perspective when you do go out and go to different locations, where it's like, you've built a network in this location here, but then you go out and like, okay, you're just someone else, and God knows, like I've especially it just puts a new perspective to everything too there. So that no, that's kind of interesting that you put that there into that little aspect there.
And I think that's kind of what maybe held me back even this weekend, with it being Fan Expo down here in Dallas, that I did see on the Fan Expo Dallas like fan page or whatever. Some people were asking for photographers, and I got really close to in that reply button, going like, "Yeah, I might. I've been known to take a photo here or there. I'd be interested in coming down to the convention center and doing it. I think maybe next year down here, it'll another year down here, and I'll feel a little better about redoing that. Restarting some of that process.
So I guess to play devil's advocate, like what stopped you from replying to that? Was it just because of that you're either just focused on your own, work that you need to catch up on, or what stopped you from trying to make that connection? I'm actually
Um,
very curious. I'm very curious on this.
I mean, a bunch of things. This stream itself interrupted it.
Oh, sorry.
Can't
I'm
wait.
sorry.
No, just
Whoopsie.
kidding. Yeah, since it started today. I mean, today would have probably been the best day
I
to
mean,
go
yeah,
because
yeah,
that
yeah. I guess, yeah, we are
tried.
on a Friday of a convention,
Yeah,
so yes, I'm
yeah.
sorry that,
Oh
albeit this
no.
was supposed to be on a
Yeah,
Thursday, but
exactly. So it's actually I have no one to blame but myself. I think I've probably used the reason of moving in, of trying to settle in, find my way around, just outside of photography down here. I mean,
Mhm.
we still haven't even finished our furniture shopping yet. We came down here with no furniture. Um, basically like our clothes and my Gundams and collectibles. uh, so that's probably one reason, is just like the whole settling in process. Like I'm getting there. It's almost, I
Hold
think we're
on,
almost.
I
Yeah.
lost your audio. Give me a second
Okay.
here. That is interesting. Drop out. Yeah, I lost your audio. Or
Am I back now, or
I'm like, this is my headphones, or it could just be me. Hold on. All right, I'm gonna switch over to my regular headphones for a quick second here. All right. Talk to me for a little bit, Anthony, while I
yeah?
try
Can you
to
hear me now?
double check.
You able to hear me?
All right. Let's see. Just talk random
Hello?
stuff. Just random
Yeah,
stuff.
are you able to hear me at all? I'm just gonna keep talking
All right, there we
in
go.
the
We're good.
microphone.
We're
Okay.
good.
All right.
Perfect.
Yeah, so what I was saying is like, yeah, I mean the settling process, I think that's pretty much 90 95, if I'm going to quantify it, 99.5% of the way there, settled down here. um I think it was just probably the big, I think the big thing was just finding the energy to, again, put myself out there and going down there. I think that it's just the energy, and I'm like, in prepping for like this stream, and I think that's kind of reinvigorated me and gotten me to go like, what, it's time probably to, and that's why I think I said earlier, next month or two, I'll probably put myself out there down here, and I think
Hmm.
then at least it's a little more controlled environment where I'm not going, hey, I'm going to start this all up again at a convention. I mean, I think that would be easy, or
Yeah.
maybe, but for me, it's like, okay, I got to do. I mean, I went to Fan Expo last year as a regular attendee, in Dallas, because I was getting some comic art, but I was just like, man, this location is just crazy in terms of like, it's not. I don't think it's well laid out. It's nowhere near like C2E2. Um,
Or fan or Wizard World, what have you.
I think even like Wizard World Chicago or Fan Expo Chicago now is still better laid out, or at least at the Stevens Convention Center is much nicer than, at least bigger, in a way of like, okay, you can get here. It's like when I first came here, and again, maybe it's because I'm new. It's at the Hutchinson Convention Center down here, K Bailey Hutchinson Convention Center. But it was like I felt like
Hutchinson.
I had to walk for like a mile before I from the parking lot just to get into the place, like where the show floor was. And it was like really they set it up really weird. Like their cosplay guests were outside of the actual convention. Like just imagine like that whole lobby area where the
Yeah.
DJ is at C2E2. Imagine
Uh-huh.
they put all the cosplay guests out there.
Not need to heck?
Yeah, so they put them outside of the. So it's like if you had a badge, you just walk right past them. You would walk past them potentially and just go into the convention and not even realize the cosplay guests weren't inside. So they would have put like your cosplay meetup group and then like the guested cosplayers outside. And I think they did that to maybe get eyeballs on them, but I felt like it detracted from it because you're like, I'm just trying to get onto the show floor,
Yeah, you
you
got the
know.
main headliners like right in there, the fronts, and yet
Yeah,
there's still so much more in the back. Yeah, that's
yeah. So
and this is for
I
Fan
just
Expo. Heck, what was this Fan Expo or what was it?
yeah, Fan Expo Dallas.
Fan
That's what
Expo
they
Dallas. None.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah,
they
because I know for the Fan Expo Chicago, it's like, all right, they had the whole lineup of celebrities you could sign an autograph, but it's like literally it takes like the whole wall of the Donald Stevenson Convention Center and plus more. Like when you go further down, then you see like a double line area, but that is
yeah.
still
So like
within. That
the
is
big
still within it. But I'm like, yeah,
yeah.
that like right in the
So
front.
the big
Like,
celebrities are inside. So last year we had like people
okay,
from like Last Airbender, like the voice actors. We had other big
yeah,
celebrities. They're inside, but for whatever reason, they feel cosplay guests, the ones that are the come and meet so and so
uh,
cosplayer, they have to sit outside. And
that they're the ones that sit outside. Because
yeah,
the
like
cosplay
outside the
guests
main
in
floor.
Fan Expo Chicago were inside, but they were deep back in the areas there. So
Yeah,
interesting.
but at least like if you were like attending and let's say you're going for a specific cosplayer while you're wandering the floor, you could run into them and be like, oh, hey, this is cool, oh
Uh-huh.
cosplayers. But Fan Expo for Dallas, it's like unless you paid attention, you would just walk past them because they would have like the information booths out there.
Yeah.
You
Okay.
know,
Yeah. I think I have an idea. So it's like, kind of
yeah,
like at the Donald Stevenson, like how they had that lobby because they did have a at the Chicago Fan Expo. They did have a little in the lobby area, if you will, of like the
okay,
Donald Stevenson area where usually people hang out. They did make that as a area for like attendees to like walk through, but then there is like an official merchandise booth, if you will, in the
okay,
center.
yeah, I think I remember
So,
that. Yeah,
so I think that's how I'm kind of imagining. Where it's like that's where the cosplay guests were was kind of like nearby like the main entrance of like when you
yeah,
first
and
walk
that's how it
into
was.
after going
Yeah,
through security, after going through registration, and then it's like, all right, here's the merchandise booth before you enter the actual. No, that's interesting. I never.
yeah,
Albeit like I give credit to whatever you know convention organization like they got to work with whatever venue they got to work with. But I was like,
yeah.
that's interesting to throw the cosplay guests at the beginning of before going into the main hall, if you will, if that's the
And
correct verbiage.
it's not as if like this convention hall is tiny. It's big. It's just like it's the
The
layout
layout.
is yeah. And Fan Expo tends at least here. I my impression is that it's a celebrity convention. I mean, the celebrity area is pretty big for all the crowds, but like Artist
Yeah.
Alley for what I like, it was like a few aisles, and it was interesting because they put in, like typically when I go to like let's say New York Comic Con, I see Artist Alley separately, and there's
Mhm.
like 400 artists there in one little annex, not a little, but a separate area of the convention center. Um, you know, but here it's like they were mixing in artists with like people who I guess they would be considered artist vendors, but they're more selling
Vendor booths,
yeah,
if
like
you will.
part of the
Yeah,
vendor booth.
which I
Yeah,
think,
and they're just like
yeah,
stick them all
there
together.
has been a blur as well with here in Chicago, where it's like there is a little bit of bits where it's like, all right, no, these are vendor booths, but then it kind of like merges where it's like, all right, there's some that are kind of vendor booths, then they sometimes throw in some cosplay organizations, then it goes into Artist Alley or something like that. So like
Okay.
albeit that is a transition, but it is kind of like that. But it was like it's not a subtle transition. Oh, hi, Hadi. Sorry, my cat's in the background. So, no, that's kind of interesting. So, because yeah, you do have so many organizations and such that just kind of go around and what have you of that little bit there. Um, so just kind of like that little fun there. So okay, so we were talking a little bit about. So, albeit, let me ask this upfront question: would you have photography as your full time hobby, or are you kind of fine with having this? Or sorry,
Sorry, you cut out
sorry,
there.
I misstated the question. Would photography be your full time job or a hobby? But I'm guessing that by keeping it as a hobby is what you're leaning towards. Am I correct?
Actually, I wouldn't mind making it a full-time job,
Really?
but
How so?
I don't think in the cosplay world.
Hmm.
I think it could be more if I was doing boudoir or portraits. Um, just because I think you're still beholden to the economy, the economic headwinds or tailwinds that you might have in any industry might be more painful as a creative. I mean, we saw that like I think you mentioned at the beginning of the stream, like talking about like the pandemic, and it's like all of a sudden we're doing shoots from like
Virtual
virtual
shoots.
shoots.
No,
Yeah,
that was
uh,
like one of my images that I was sharing at
yeah.
the beginning of the stream. That was a virtual shoot. So
So
yeah,
I mean,
no, you're
I
right.
would like to do it because I feel like that's something as I when I get older, like in retirement, I could do something like that. I mean, can I do my day job? And I mean, can I do legal stuff in when I'm older? Yeah, I think that might be easier on the body than photography. But I think
Hmm.
the creative aspect of it is probably why I am interested in doing it as a full time thing. Whether the reality of that happens anymore, I mean, at one point I thought that could be, but I'm like, just to there's to protect myself economically, I would probably continue on doing it as like as a side thing. I mean, my next step is like beyond, whether it's reaching out to the cosplay community or, but like starting to put myself back out there as a photographer and hopefully getting a studio spot down here. I
Hmm.
mean, I think that's probably the thing that will let me know like, hey, can I taking this a little more seriously? But again, I think that it's really tough. I mean, and you know yourself. I mean, you have a day job that it does help you absorb those dry spells, right? When you're not
Hmm.
shooting or doing something that's paid, related
Yeah.
to photography, then you're just like, or like it's like, hey, it's a little easier when, I go if I was in my early 20s, I could be a starving artist, but I'm not in my early 20s anymore, so I can't be a starving artist because you know Gundams don't buy themselves. You know, or, strobes, lenses, whatever, camera bodies, they don't buy themselves
Hmm.
necessarily. I mean, I would love to be like one of those photographers who could do it full time. That's why when you ask, like, would that be my dream? Yeah, I don't think it would be the reality though
Hmm.
for me.
Well, so as you were kind of mentioning about having a studio or something like that, what if money was not no issue? How would you build your own photo studio, like set up and what have you? Because it sounds like yeah, you wouldn't mind having if it wasn't just photography, like if it was just boudoir, maybe portraits or such. How would you go about to making your own studio?
Yeah, when I was up in Chicago, you know that place down in the Pilsen area, the artist loft about it's that U-Haul building or whatever, where
Yeah,
all those
yeah, yeah. I know,
yeah.
I know. On
Yeah.
Cermak and no,
Yeah.
the yes, yes. I'm aware. I'm
So
not too far from there.
that particular building there, I actually had submitted my name to, whoever runs that portion of it.
Mm,
And this is like I think in 2021, 2022. And at the time she had mentioned to me there's like a wait list for it. And I was thinking
mm,
of renting a studio space there, like getting one of those, you know, places there to set up my own studio there.
mm,
Ironically, just as I was getting ready to move, or I think like 6 months before, I don't know, we already knew we were moving, but 6 months before our move, I was contacted by them like, oh, the spot's freed up. Would you like it? Well,
mm.
too late, can't take it. But yeah. So I would. My preference at the time was I was looking for, and I was actually looking for spaces. I was actually looking for one that was nearer my place out in Wicker Park to maybe even share a space with this. He was a wedding photographer, so he didn't really need the studio itself. But he was doing his editing there, so that's kind of
Yeah.
what stopped me from uh, sharing the space with him because I actually my idea of a studio would be have a editing workspace. I could do edits there, like maybe after a shoot, decompress, whatever. Maybe even come in like on days when I don't have a shoot just to do a few hours so it feels like you're going into the office, right? Getting a little
Hmm.
more productive. Because it's really tough in any man cave situation for me to be as productive as I'd like to be. And then having the shoot space there. And so the shoot space, I'd love to, because of the content being boudoir typically, having something that's set up, your standard bed, maybe having, every place I go, I always want a big, gigantic full length mirror that I can't find that to my, something ornate. I'd want something like that. Just things like that. Little areas that might be like a vignette, like a vignette for the shoot. Like here's a little couch that I can use for the boudoir. So everything would be focused around boudoir. Then
Hmm.
if there was enough room, then at least a spot where I could do whether it's just single portraits, single full figures type of deal. Not necessarily an infinity wall, but something where I could just do more backdrop type of shoots if needed. I mean, I don't do those anymore, but it came up. For instance, I went up to Chicago. I was doing theme that I was doing with the Fangirl was Disney After Dark.
Hmm.
So, it was a lot more. Uh, it is more risque Disney stuff, but like what if the Disney princesses? I mean, people have done it, ad nauseum
Yeah.
before, but I kind of wanted to put my own little, you know, grown up versions of it. And one of them was like a pinup version of Belle. Well, pinups to me, I still like.
Excuse me. Sorry.
Oh, bless you.
Sorry.
Pinups still for me, I like them behind, in front of a backdrop for that rather
Hmm.
than set. But we didn't have that,
Or
so
backdrop, you mean?
paper,
Yeah.
seamless
You
paper
you
type
you
of
want it
deal.
on a set versus like just a studio backdrop, like paper
Yeah,
thing, kind of.
yeah.
Correct.
Not for the pinup. I actually wanted the studio backdrop rather
Okay.
than a set.
Okay. Okay.
But for some of the other ones, the set worked. It's just like so. I always envision like my future studio would have that flexibility. If I had to pick and choose, I'd rather have sets in there rather than a backdrop for my future studio.
Hmm.
Whether I have workspace in there, like as in for editing, maybe not, but I wouldn't mind like again for a space where like because the idea would be to do in-person sales. Also, like the boudoir client comes by, they have an area to change, relax, get makeup done, hair and makeup, and then they come into the actual studio spot, the my studio spot to shoot on the sets, and then they can leave after that for like whether it's a late lunch, then come back like an hour or two later to basically see some of the images and then quote in-person sale purchase stuff, whether it's
Okay.
prints or albums. But that would be my ideal thing. Whether that happens, who knows?
Hmm. No, no, fair, fair. So it's kind of like trying to pick the best comparison. It's kind of like for lack of a better word, like senior headshots, where it's like, all right, because there's like this one place I recall in the western suburbs, Wyckoff Tweedy, who uh kind of like handle all the headshots that were for basically my high school or probably the high schools around the suburbs area. And yet,
Uh,
they kind of had a good business where like people come in, they would get their photos. Some would be outside, like around the area. Some would be inside in the studio location, to which they had like some brick walls to which they could set up around that. And then, either some of us can high school students who had the the parents wallets open to take the
yeah.
photos or to choose the photos, if you will, um to just choose the photos like, oh, this looks great, that looks amazing. So it's kind of like that little business practice where it's like you kind of have a little bit of a studio, but you also have that little workspace as well to just in terms of like the days when you don't do any photo shoots, you could work on it. Sounds right.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's what it would be. I mean, it's not like that would be my primary
and and
editing
and they did
studio.
they did have a little bit of a front of house, like where it's like, all right, here's the front of house where people can wait. They have photos of previous examples, but then inside, like, because it wasn't that bad. It was like, in fact, you could like literally get off the BNSF track and you could still see that same studio nearby or something like that. So I don't know. Yeah, that is kind of like an interesting layout of an effect for a studio, where it's like, all right, you have your front of house just to manage, clients coming in, and then or whoever's interested, or waiting areas, and then you do your shoots, whatever. Then either they can visit around the local town area, be like, all right, go to the Starbucks across the street or what have you, just to get
Yeah,
coffee,
go
and then
go grab a coffee at Starbucks or whatever, but then at least then come back, and then
hmm,
let's look at your images type of deal.
no, no, exactly, yeah, because as I said, I do, albeit it has been literally probably 15 years to the day since I did those senior headshots, but it's like I do remember that experience, and that experience was kind of like, it was definitely a client favorite kind of thing, like there. So
Have you thought about going back into that at
into what?
any point? Into like doing like senior headshots again?
I mean, I've done a couple, but I mean, not too much. I mean, but as I said, I feel like, as I said, that person, I feel like they got they're dominant in the western suburbs, what have you. So I was like, all right, they got their claim there, but at the same time, it's like, especially since I do a lot of cosplay work and what have you, I think that's just what I'm kind of with at the moment.
Okay.
I did take a couple senior headshots, albeit it was either family or it was like neighbors during COVID, if you will. So it's like I did take a couple during that time. But
Yeah, because as I said, that's what I actually did. My niece, she's graduating from high school. Did
this
her
year
senior.
or recently?
Yeah, just this. Yeah,
Oh,
when I
that's right.
was
That's
just
right.
up
That's
there.
right.
Yeah,
That's
so
right.
it's like
That's right. That's right.
I did hers along with a friend of hers, and I was like, oh, you know what? It's actually, and they, so I was asking, I was kind of like getting information from her in terms of like her friends and like they were doing, and she's just like, it's not. I mean, it's not dead.
It's not dead,
It's
but I
yeah,
think I think it's just more the fact of the matter where it's like, all right, for that instance, it was like, all right, it's your niece, you got the photos taken of. It's like, all right, are your niece's friends gonna hire you or something like that? Which, again, I guess it's that little bit where it's like you gotta have a credible business or something like that, or established location to that degree to be able
yeah,
to.
yeah. And I mean, I think but I think that that's something that is my
No, it's
perspective and an easier sell as a photographer than it would be to sell boudoir.
true, true, true. Yeah, I do agree. Yes, that is definitely something where you do have new clients repeating every year, and you do have the clientele repeating over and over.
Yeah,
But I think as long as you have an established location, particularly location, because God knows, like, as I said, like, I think that's that what it was, where it's like, all right, Hinsdale Central was like, all right, go to this person for your senior headshots, or they have a deal with this particular school.
yeah,
And I think that's
yeah,
just where you got that establishment there. So as I said,
yeah,
it's the connections or whatever establishments, whether you've done it years. So as I said, it is something to that degree where it is established. While for you and I, it's this off chance of some senior portraits
yeah,
with some
yeah.
people that we know or what have you, if you will. Um, so, but yeah, so I guess a question that this is a new question that I've thrown in that I haven't thrown in. What do you think is the measure of success of a photographer? As we're talking about, like, all right, I've talked about this photographer who clearly is established here in the western suburbs, who takes uh senior portraits, but he could have a Instagram handle that doesn't have too many followers versus us in the cosplay community, where there are some photographers who are in the thousands, if you will. So what do you think measures this what do you think is the measure of success as a photographer?
I mean, I guess it depends on which angle you're approaching it. If it's just talking about financial freedom, independence, whatever you want to call it, then it's making money that puts you in a state where you're like, I'm comfortable. I don't have to. I'm not necessarily worried living. I mean, we all live paycheck to paycheck from a certain extent, but that could also be just because of our vast consumerism here in America.
Mhm.
Um, but like living like if you're talking about from a financial sense, then I would say like that would be a successful photographer is somebody who's like I can pay my bills. Not necessarily live like extravagantly, but I can be like I that's successful to me. I mean, you don't need to be a billionaire
Mhm.
to live a good life. I mean, whatever reason we don't go that way anymore. But personally, I think does I hate to do the whole like Marie Kondo thing. Does it bring you joy?
So what?
The whole Marie Kondo thing, like minimizing stuff in your life. Her saying was like does it bring you joy in terms of like getting rid of
Oh.
stuff? So I'm saying this
Oh, like the
photography,
the the feng shui, or
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
like
yeah,
kind of like that mindset where it's like, have you
yeah.
brought me joy, or has your joy reached to extent, and I thank you for the experience or whatever that you've
Yeah, and for
provided me.
me, that would make me feel like I'm a successful photographer. Is like, is what I'm doing bringing me joy? And I think again, that's from the luxury of having the privilege of having a day job that takes care of
Hmm.
the adulting part of life, right?
Yeah.
So I can sit there and firmly say, like, to me, is this art, this crafting that I'm doing, is this bringing me joy? And if it is, and that's makes me feel successful. It's not the number of Instagram. I mean, early on you could say like, yeah, I felt, and to this day, every once in a while, it still does. But we know that it's the photographer mantra. I mean, it's like seriously, you could post work that you're like, this is my best image ever. I spent so much time prepping for this, and I love this, and you get like 10 likes, and you're just
Yeah.
like, okay, or the algorithm or whatever. Somebody posts a selfie of themselves looking cute, and they get like 1.5 million, and you're just like, okay, this sucks. Whatever.
Yeah.
I
Just
used
the
to,
odds are not in our favor.
yeah, I used to worry about not worry, but I used to think about stuff like that. I don't care anymore. I mean, I'm just like, whatever. It's just my stuff is out there. If people like it, that's great. But the biggest thing is it bringing me joy, and I think that's why we've gone back and forth, even on like Instagram. We're like, I don't post in free from a shoot anymore, like rows or stuff like that. I
Yeah.
don't worry about that. And I mean, I know that you're going back to that as well, where you're just like,
No.
I'm just going to
Yeah.
do what brings you joy, right? What
No,
makes sense
exactly.
for
Like
you.
I've had that format because that was the mindset that I've had for years. And in fact, like the mindset I had prior was like, I'm gonna make this a art showcase, or I'm gonna post 15 photos in a week of this set. And I was like, oh god, it was exhausting. It was like exhausting then, and even trying to do the 3 set post is exhausting now. To which even then it just kind of just makes things awkward. It's like, you know what? I'd rather be spontaneous, and that's just my life as well. Life is
And,
spontaneous, and I'm
yeah,
fine
and I
with
mean
that.
that. I think that actually frees that spontaneity clearly frees you up to do things. When you talk about like photography, I mean, just like I just know I would sit there and struggle with like, oh my god, I got to have this schedule of posting, do this like
Hmm.
automatically, so people will like. But it's like, are people even recognizing there's a theme? Like
Have
this
a
theme, the theme of the
theme.
week this
Have a
week is like,
theme.
yeah, is like
Yeah.
red. Well, does anybody know
Or
that's red unless I
this
tell people?
particular set, but then you get like either, especially if you're posting like a certain set, and then it's like, all right, you get like that first post that has a good interaction, but then either it kind of fades out afterwards. So I was like, all right, then
Yeah.
what's, as much as it looks nice on the grid and what have you, it just, I don't know. As I said, I've learned like more falters. And the other thing is, especially as well, which I've learned recently, where it's like, me and Haley and a few other people have just nudging our heads on, is especially those who of us who've thought hard on the idea of like, all right, I need to keep my grid formatted to whatever, but I cannot accept collabs because the collabs will exude my format. And of course, it's only like after I like removed the whole 3 grid format that I was like, all right, I'm gonna accept collabs. But then I realized you could remove, you know, photos or whatever the person whoever posted, you can remove it technically on your grid. I'm like, what? I would have accepted
Yeah, no,
collabs so many years ago. So it's like
yeah.
the
No,
thing
when
is
I saw
always
you,
changing so
yeah.
much, and it's just that little bit where I'm like, if things are just changing, it's wild nilly, and it's just like you just gotta go with the. It's not just that you gotta go with the flow. You just gotta just do your own thing at this point. Like you're
Yeah.
told one thing, and then he's like, oh, you gotta go with another. What have you?
But when I actually saw your story about that whole collab thing, I was just like, holy crap, I could have. I mean, I know a few months ago I had cleaned out some collabs because I was trying to get the rows to be at least even, you know?
Rose. Yes, the
Yeah. And I'm just like, you know
rose.
what? Yeah. And I'm just like, now I'm like, if I could do that, then this doesn't mean I dislike somebody's. I mean, that's why I'm like, yeah, if you want to collab with me, go ahead and do that on your Instagram post because if it does end up breaking a grid thing that I have in mind, I'll just do that. I'm not like not acknowledging it, video. So yeah, I mean,
Well, especially because like that was like that factor of the matter where it was like again, as I said, I switched to this whole single format, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna accept. There were some people who were reposting a lot of stuff from the same set. I was like, all right, do I want to see this repeated so much on my grid? I was like,
yeah,
no,
yeah,
I'll keep this, group photo versus like, the individuals. I'll remove that, but I'll at least keep the grid one. But then I think it was like someone, because again, how I changed my format from the, which again was a format that I've had for like almost 5 years, of the grid format. And I started to downsize, like, all right, I'm just going to show one photo of each of those 3 grid sets I had. And then I saw one person basically like remove themselves as a collaborator. And I was like, first of all, like, I understand for your grid, yes, you want to try to remove me as a collaborator from all these sets. But then I was like, but wait, you can still keep that, even though like I archive the other photos, you could still just remove it from your grid and you can still be a collaborator on that set. But by you removing the collab on the set, then you're not getting that interaction of your audience versus my audience or what have you. So as I said, it's like that little bit of like subtleties where it's like, even though you think you're trying to clean up your grid by removing as a collab, there's another setting that you could do just to remove this extra image that might be
yeah.
ruining your grid, but yet you're still getting the audience, what have you. So as I said, that's kind of like also why I switched, because like I don't think, for like a better word, Instagram gives a damn anymore, and that's why like I kind of was like, I don't care anymore. God knows the grid format has given me enough trouble as it is, of like whether interaction or other things. But it's like that's like I don't care anymore. And at the same time, like and as I said, I've removed the thought of ideas like I gotta construct a script. I got draft up so many posts for ready for whenever I make this post or what have this post series or whatever. I'm like, I'm just posting whatever. And honestly, it's given me a lot of just ease or freedom, if you will. And I'm
Oh,
just
and I
happy
think
about it.
that yeah, I mean, it shouldn't be us. It's already enough when we're like trying to edit or do whatever. To now have to factor in this whole social media, like, oh my god, it's. And I think that if you ask me those times when I go like on hiatus from social media, it's not because I hate it. It's just I don't want to deal with having to try to post something in this preconceived notion of like, okay, I got to match it, I got to do a grid or whatever, and that's why. I mean, I used to think about that, but I got to the point where I'm over it now, and it's just like if I post, I post. Like I don't think I've posted anything. Maybe now in like a couple of weeks, I'll probably start posting again next week. But I was just like,
Mm,
it wasn't anything like. It's just like I just don't feel like it. I mean, I have content that I could put up there, but it's just like I don't want it to be like a daily thing where I'm grinding to put something up there because it'll get out there at some point. I'm not in a rush to do it.
mm-hmm. Exactly. And it's that same bit where it's like I always felt restricted by the 3 grid format, where it's like, all right, I
Mhm.
want to share stuff from this trip that I've done, but it's like I got to wait until either I edit 3 photos or what have you to post it. But now it's like, all right, now I could just do whatever. So as I said, I felt a little bit of freedom from all of it. and what have
And I do think I like the tip that you found that I read on your story, because like I said, I've had, you know, cosplayers, models sharing stuff, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't want to like share so many things from that shoot, because it's gonna oversaturate what people want to see, right? They're gonna be like, oh my god, I don't want to see any more of that.
you. Hmm.
But by the same token, it's like having that ability to move it at least from the grid and still collaborate. I feel like that makes it better in that
Oh,
sense.
and especially like another thing, which I know that's a question with us photographers, where it's like, especially for paid clients, where it's like, all right, I finished the photos, I send you the photos, and yet the client does not post the photos. To which either they're, and again, there's a number of reasons. Whether I've always heard it's like either they're just busy with their own lives and they haven't had the time to post the photos, which albeit that's understandable. Sometimes it could
Yes.
be a personal thing where it's like they are thankful for the shoot, but it's either something on them, to which, you know, they, even though they're thankful for the photos, they just, something about them just does not want them to post. So, and again, it's that bit where it's like, I remember someone posted about saying like, when is a good time to post the photos of like a client who did not post the photos, but you want to still share the photos. And I remember I say it to them being like, I would give it a week or two after I send them the photos, but if they don't post it, then I'm gonna post it myself. But I'm still gonna give them the, like, you know, collab like tag in there, just so that they can accept it as their own post if they want to, just to
I
get
think
them.
I think that's a good compromise for that, because I mean, it's at the end of the day, it's also your work too, especially if it's a collab. It's also your work too, and I mean, why shouldn't you share? I mean, again, just like I'm sure there are times when I'll see an image posted, a set that I've done, that the you know, the model will say like, oh my gosh, I this is like my favorite image or what have you, and I'm like thinking to myself like, wow, that's your favorite image. No, I'm not as necessarily as enthused about that image, but I think it's a, you know, for whatever reason, I'm just like, that wasn't my favorite out of the set. But you know, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, right? So
No, exactly.
I think, you know, but if they're not going to post anything from it, yeah, I would give them time, and then, you know, like I think the 2 weeks thing sounds good to me. And then at that point, I'd be like, it's fair game. I'm just going to go ahead and do it then.
Yeah, perfect. So no, thank you on that. Sorry, girlfriend just brought me
I know.
dinner. So
You
it's
gotta
just,
eat. Don't, you can't. I mean, I've been trying to sneak bites off on the side, but
no,
I
no,
feel
no,
like I'm
exactly,
still in the
exactly.
frame. I'm just
I
bending
told you this.
down.
I told you this, where it's like, you're more than welcome to eat on the side if you can, because God knows I will, as I keep asking you questions, letting you ramble on here. Well, speaking of ramble, let's see. So you're photo editing right now. What is your process? What makes you decide how to edit a photo? Do you just examine it here and there, or what have you, as you know, mindless distraction for me to have my dinner here?
Hmm. I mean,
So like,
workflow wise,
so like, yeah, your workflow wise, as well as like, what is your usual process, if you will?
I think, you know, I mentioned I'm trying to do this food as quickly as I can.
No, no, because I'm trying to eat as well. Just on top of you.
I think, you know, I mentioned to you, I'll do a quick call at the beginning of just picking what I think, framing wise, picture wise, I think, you know, what will work or what won't. So, you know, like when we were, I think, gearing up for this, I looked through my the Disney sets, one of these Disney
Mm-hmm.
sets. I looked through one of these Disney sets, and I started like, I do color coding through Lightroom. You know, yellows are potential um images that I might be interested in editing. So I filter, you know, I do yellows. From there, I will then start doing slider work in Lightroom. Slider work is just like more of the global setting. So, you know, if like, let's say this one I'm going to edit, I'd be like, oh, you know what, I'm going to, you know, blah blah blah, do this and that, you know, under the basic slider, you know, exposure, just doing anything like that. Color correct, you know, some color correcting from there. I do like this mask feature that they have now for selection in Lightroom.
Oh,
I think that's pretty
like
powerful.
particular selections or what have you?
Yeah, like select person one, and then like I'll like if you look at some of my edits, it'll be like I've like like on the Lucy stuff that I was working on, and find ones that are PG 13. Uh, like even like this one that I was working on tonight is just like, oh, I mean, if you look at my develop settings, they're edited here, and then I've got all these masks that I've done with it. I do
I will say
masking
like
work on.
one thing because I do a lot of Lightroom mobile work.
Huh?
Like, but so I edit on my tablet mostly. But
Okay.
I will say like it is kind of interesting where it's like the Lightroom tablet does not have as much options versus like the
Yeah, and I think
PC.
that's probably what prevented me ever from getting over to the tablet. I know you like, for instance, I remember you and Haley were we're doing, and I tried to do. I ended up getting an iPad Pro to do it. I just cannot. At the time, I just felt it was missing some of the things that I was doing, at least in Lightroom, and I could
Mhm.
never get it to. I'm sure there was a way, and there probably is a way now, but I can never get it to sync up with my catalog properly on Lightroom Classic because I use all this color coding, so it would just throw
Mhm.
me for a loop that way. But
Well, I will also say like, especially because when I was editing like a Doom shoot or something like that, I was able to specifically select just one of the people there, or especially with Doom, how we're required like, all right, their eyes need to be that hue of blue or whatever, and I was able to easily select that in like the PC like or the computer's Lightroom versus Lightroom mobile. So I was like, oh god, that's like an engine that wouldn't allow me to do this versus on my
yeah,
iPad versus on the computer.
so after I've done my selections, in terms of like yellow color coding, and then I do like the global edits. At that point, that's when I'm like, okay, well now I'm going to proceed with Photoshop work. So I'll take one of these images, that I've color corrected, whatever, and then I will then like that's why I've been working on it in Photoshop. I'll just open it up in Photoshop. Then I go through a whole bunch. That's when I do my frequency separation to clean up anything, but more so for whether it's boudoir or whatever. Dodging and burning, sharpen, whatever. And then I use another program. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's Optics.
Optics for editing, or I use
Yeah.
Aftershoot
So
to help. I use Aftershoot to help cull photos, but
yeah. So
tell
this
me
is
more.
after call. Yeah. So this is after culling, and this is after putting it into Photoshop. So here in Photoshop, I've got these layers where I've done frequency separation. I actually added a curve because I wanted to bring out some more uh, highlights in her eyes and stuff like that. But then dodge and burn, sharpen. That's typically my path. That's how I usually do it: is dodge and burn, sharpen, and then I will compress it in one layer. I think that's what you call it, not compressing, but I just have a shortcut key for it, and I forget what the heck it is.
Hmm.
It's like you're just turning all the layers into one layer. You're merging, like merging visible, something like that.
Hmm.
This is my merge visible layer. From here, I actually open. I've got this a separate third-party program called from Boris FX called Optics. That's where I actually do. I've got presets that I've built out of it, where I have actually, I've got various setups where I can actually, I've got things set up for like, oh, this is for like a boudoir shoot that might be edited at one point. I did all this and I saved it, so it's like, oh, desert warm, forest witch, general, rain room, cool, those type of things, and it basically puts in things like like different lighting looks, enhancements of certain RGB, colors, tone adjustments, all what have you, all of that. So just another color correcting thing for me. Um, then once that's done, it gets sent back, and then finally I can put the finishing touches on it. So like in this case, it's like any additional things, and then my watermark.
Hmm.
That's usually the process, and I think that's why probably it takes me I mean, I'm sure any photographer watching this would be like, dude, that guy takes way too long to do his crap. And I mean, I'll be the first to admit that I'm sure there are plenty of workflow efficiencies for me. If this was my main job, I probably would be doing. I mean, I'm not a preset person, and it's not that I have anything against presets. Just like my presets, there's some of the ones that I have, and I go with those. Um, and I don't know if it's just how I shot out of camera, so it doesn't necessarily work with some of the presets that I've seen online that I like, and I'm like, I can't find one that works for me, so I'm just like, I just have my own I use that work more frequently than not, for at least the
I
way I shoot.
I always feel like presets are just something to help jumpstart the idea. So it's
Yes,
like
agree,
just
100%.
just something where it's like, all right. And again, like sometimes whenever I go, I either have like my save presets, like or whatever presets that I've saved, or um to be like, all right, here's some presets I use that look great for some sets I've done. Let me save them and then use them and see whatever works. Otherwise, then I go to the Lightroom mobile, which they sometimes have some adaptive presets they recommend, and just whoever works there. Um,
I agree 100% on that. I mean, it's like the presets, it lets you see kind of like, hey, what could the finished product be like? And I do that. I mean, that's what I like about that final preset, that optics program that I use, because those are some preset, those are some looks there that give me an idea of like, look, can I, some of them are they're kind of film driven type of look. So it's like, they're given names like, oh, this is like Ben Hur, or this is Cleopatra, or
oh yeah.
Alien, or whatever. So it kind of gives you that. Okay, I know it's going to be a little desaturated here. Let me see what it looks like. Okay, I'll put it in, like you said, and then
It's
I'll
funny
tweak
enough
it.
where it's like you're talking about like presets of like, okay, based on classical movies, and like I've been in dabbling because like, all right, I've had a number of presets. I'm like, all right, how much do I like save and either try and market, be like, all right, how much do I sell this as a pack? But then I'm like, all right, how do I advertise as that pack? Be like, I don't want to exactly be like, this is the Evil Dead pack, this is the
And I
Saw
think
pack.
that's how you do it. Yeah, I think that
And
would work.
but I'm like, all right, I'm trying to think creatively, but like, all right, how do I be like, all right, I could call the Evil Dead pack like the Ex Mortis,
Yeah.
or like the Saw one, Jigsaw, just something to make it off brand. But then, as I
Yes.
said, like as I said, it's something I've been dabbling slash figuring out. Where it's like, all right, I've been trying to dive into sales, but either I have the concept or ideas, but I have not quite executed yet. But it's like, all right, if I were to dive into this, I'm like, I definitely know whatever sets I've had for this shoot, whether it's an Evil Dead or Saw or JoJo Bizarre's Adventure, where it's like, all right, I gotta find like off-brand names and not say this is the JoJo photo edits, but it's like, I don't know, like Joe Star. I don't know. Either way, so it is kind of like the little bit where, and again, oh, is that a prism photo they took, or is that?
Yeah, no, I'm just showing you like on this particular software that I use, for that final look. If you look at the
So is that image itself like a image that from that software itself, or is that a?
no, that's a separate photo that I have. I just happen to be the layer that you're looking at.
Yeah,
But
because
what
like
I
I have like taken photos like when I went to like ColossCon, and I like just had like a prism with my
yeah,
like my camera, and I was like, all right, I'm just gonna get some random light effects or bokehs, if you will. So it's like, or this like those
yeah, so that's
flares.
always, yeah, those are good to put on. I use those as my overlays on sometimes
No,
when I'm like
exactly, and I
I
have
can't replicate it.
I have like, yeah, a setting as well for that, but I always find I use those for
Yeah.
certain sets versus others, but it's still good to have. But did you
Yeah,
make
but
those, or is that just something that came with the set?
not with this. This is completely separate. So the image
Okay.
that you're looking at is completely separate. I was going to show you, at least mention like, when you're talking about like naming some of your presets, like this particular software here, they put listed under their color correct, one of their color correct tabs, and it's just all different movies. So it kind of gives you that idea of
Mm.
like, hey, like right now I've got Ben Hur, being applied to this. Then you
Okay.
can adjust it if you need, but it's like, if I wanted like 2001: A Space Odyssey, then it actually changes it to look to that, or Gone with the Wind. It just, I mean, it looks better on an image rather than
Are
some
these
abstract thing.
is this Photoshop LUTs? Because I know there's like one where it's like Lightroom is presets versus like Photoshop as LUTs, I
It's similar to like it is like a lookup table, but I think that I don't it's a plugin for Photoshop, so it's not using Photoshop itself
believe. Okay.
for it. Like, for instance, in this picture here, if I had put this picture through there,
Yeah, because I keep
it
seeing that
pops up.
I keep seeing that icon popping up
Yeah,
on
so
your
this is the
screen. So
Boris. Yeah, this is the Boris one. And
all right,
here again
Boris.
is where I would be able to color correct, like with a movie, like if I wanted a certain movie vibe. So I take, like, if I wanted, let's say, oh, you know what, I want something from Apocalypse Now. I mean, it changes it to that. It's they're using basically, like, I think a lookup table very similar to what they believe filmmakers for that particular film use. So again, it depends on what you're feeding it. Like in this terms, I'm doing more of a neon image, so it doesn't necessarily work for that. Like, let's say, do they I think they have a Blade Runner. So they're if I applied Blade Runner 1 versus Blade Runner 2, and not necessarily movies, but just like the two different filters, you get that type of look for it.
Hmm.
I was just like, I'm not going to use it for that. But again, it's a way, I think, when we were talking about presets, for us to kind of visualize something. And I always think, like, again, I think presets are good. And especially if you start tweaking them because you're like, hey, you know what? I know I want more saturation or more of this or more of that. I think it's always good to know why you're applying it, because I think sometimes we get caught up and it could look like off to our
Hmm.
eyes. That
No, exactly. No, fair. So the jump start there. So another question, which I guess to follow up, because you have done a few different genres over the time, but do you think some photographers stumble into a certain genre of photography, or do you think they try to pursue it? So, like, albeit, did you ever think that you would do cosplay photography, or was it something that you kind of like dabbled into the idea or pursued it yourself?
um
Because like
I
you
don't think
did start.
I
What? Sorry. Continue.
no. I was gonna say, I don't think I pursued it per se, because obviously I started somewhere else.
Hmm.
My pursuit was doing wedding photographies, but I was just like, I don't know if I can keep up with this, but physically.
Hmm.
um I think I stumbled into it again, seeing Kitty's post, knowing full, that I had been doing some photography related to cosplay, unofficially at points in time, prior to that. And so once I think I started doing it, I was like, I enjoy it, because it's like, you've got, it's kind of like, the project teamwork I do now, where it's like, you've got some really creative people. I mean, like, really creative people out there, and it just, you're, capture those images, and it's just like one of those things where it just was more natural to do that. Whereas, sometimes, like, I think for noir shoots, it's not necessarily the same when I do that. Again, don't get me wrong, there is some, I inject some of my, what I perceive my creativity into it, but it's not like cosplay. But I think it works for, for any of the subject matter that I shoot. I don't think I really pursued it, more so that it kind of fell on my lap and I enjoyed it. Because I think when I started doing boudoir, enjoyment there was, um, I've had people tell me, like, they would never have thought about themselves doing it because whatever their body consciousness, or what have you. And it's nice to know that, whether it's, you want to say, if you're feeling empowered from it, as the subject of the photo shoot, or you're just, for whatever reasons you have. I mean, I've had people tell me, like, I'm coming out of a, recovering, coming out of a rough divorce. I'm just want to feel like myself again. I mean, I just, a whole host of reasons for that. And it just, the idea is like, it's supposed to be an outlet, for not only the photographer, but for the client too. And I think in this particular case, each time that when I've heard these things, I think that's why I've kind of stuck in this area, because it's like, not stuck as in a bad way, but I've stayed in this area because I like hearing some of those stories, or just doing those type of shoots.
Hmm.
I know that answers it for you, but it's like I don't
No, I
feel like
think
I've
so.
really pursued it. It just so happened to be that way for me.
No, no, fair. Yeah, as I said, it is kind of like that a little bit where, again, I never thought I would get into cosplay photography, but kind of like dived into it just a little bit here and there, and it just kind of just became something I just didn't expect it. So, and again, there are some that do feel like I would definitely want to be a certain type of photographer. Like I thought I was going to be a headshot or portrait photographer, but then I realized, all right, I take the portraits, but I'm like, I'm not getting repeating clients or something like that. While with
Yeah,
cosplay,
for those photographers, sometimes I'm pretty envious of that because I'm like, I wish I could be more definitive on what I'm doing, but I can't, not at this point in time.
pardon me as my cats get distracted with the laser toy in the background. Just because I was like, all right, they're both here. I was like, all right, gotta play this thing on. So as you're photo editing, what do you usually like to do to have on as a background? Because God knows, like, we're spending so many hours photo editing and such. Do you listen to any particular music, or do you watch any particular show or something like that? God knows, like, either I'm like catching up with the recent movie, or God knows, as I mentioned before, I'm in that One Piece uh wormhole that it's like, all right, just complete mindlessness to do. So what do you usually do when you photo edit?
Um, if I want to concentrate, I typically I have a photo editing mix that I have on Spotify that
Mm.
just typically it's EDM music, which is kind of interesting because I go, I want to focus, and when I listen to EDM, I actually want to dance a little more. But that's sometimes it's like when I'm in the groove, I'll put that on. But typically, I do like the uh, non-distracting things. So I will put on B horror movies.
Be horror
Sometimes
movies.
yeah, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Like movies like like Tyrannosaurus versus like Cracker Man or whatever. Just really cheesy horror movies, whether horror or action, monster type movies. I'll put those on because I pretty much know the plot point. Group of teenagers, a group of young adults, whatever. They get stranded somewhere and they all get eaten or they all get murdered or whatever. And it's like I don't have to worry about like plot points here and there. I mean, they're nothing like they're just if you were normally sitting there watching it, you kind of put your mind into like into suspension mode. Suspend your mind. So same thing when I'm editing, I can just have it on in the background, hear a noise every once in a while.
Mhm.
Sometimes it doesn't work because I do actually get interested in the movie, and I start watching the movie, and then editing goes out the window.
Yeah.
But in terms of movies, though, then there are times though I will. I mean, if there was like a movie count, like keeping track of how many movies, it would probably be The Thing and Alien. Those are like
Mm.
two movies that I love that I have on a lot because I know I won't be distracted by it anymore because I've watched them so much now. I will put
Interesting.
those on just as like background noise for me. I mean, actually earlier, I had the thing on when we were setting stuff up because I was trying to do some edits.
Really? Really?
Yeah, it's just easier for me to have that stuff
I did not even know.
going. Yeah. So it's just one of those things where it's just easier for me to kind of um
Zone out too.
yeah, I mean like The Thing is probably one of my favorite movies.
Oh, it's a good
And
classic.
yeah, and I know some people. Oh, if it's your favorite movie, shouldn't you watch it? Like pay attention. I'm like, well, I am, but it's also know it so well that I know when McCready's going to be doing this, or blah blah blah. I know this, and
Mm.
so it's like I don't necessarily need to watch it right then and there. You know, um, yeah, it's just that's typically what it is. It's just something more background noise for me gets me more editing rather than more than anything else.
Hmm. Oh, perfect. And along with, like, entertainment or stuff to keep you entertained while photo editing, do you have a snack at all that you have whenever you photo edit?
Oh, edit.
I know sometimes I have popcorn, whatever, photo edit. So I'll be at, especially since I do most of my photo editing during streams, I'm always having dinner. Well, that's served to me while I'm editing.
I'm
But
the last couple of months, I've 2 3 months, I've tried to be a little healthier, more conscious about being healthier in my lifestyle, only because I'm getting older.
Mm.
things are breaking down a little sooner than I'd like. So I don't have snacks when I edit. It's usually water,
Mm.
maybe a soda if it's sitting there. Um, just because I'm afraid I'm gonna spill something while I'm editing.
No, well,
Before I became a little more conscious
this is why I
about
have
health.
like my right side as dry, where it's like, all right, this is where my right hand is dominated, where it's like, all right, my mouse, my tower, and such, but my left side is the wet side, to which if anything were to spill on my left side, I don't have to worry about anything,
Oh, that's legit because I right now my dinner is on my left side. On my right side is nothing but the mouse and the pen here. So yeah,
No,
no,
so
that
no,
works. I mean,
it's a good way to work around it, but it's like, yeah, it's like
yeah.
I've learned too many times, and especially with two cats, where it's like I've had a drink here, and then they knock it over, and of course on like my keyboard here, I'm like, Hanky, why'd you do that, or what have you? So it's just kind of funny there. Oh my god, Heidi's just having
I think
entertainment.
before that, before I started being a little more conscious about my intake while I was editing. It was probably like chocolates. I would have chocolates.
Oh
Um,
yeah, my
and
sweet
little
tooth.
fun size Snickers and things like that. I would shove those down pretty readily.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. Oh my god, yeah. No, believe me, I got a bad sweet tooth as well on there. But yeah, I think we're kind of getting close to the end of our questions, so I think we'll kind of wrap up with a few more of just questions here. But do you have any fun projects planned for the near future? Obviously, you got Life Fantastic that you're working on, but anything else that you're planning to do?
Um, nothing at the moment. I mean, I like I said, if anything, it would happen at Life Fantastic, so that wouldn't be until September. Um, yeah, nothing that I mean, unless I get my button gear down here, unless maybe somebody randomly stumbles onto your stream who's from the Dallas area and wants to reach out, then I'd probably be open to. I would be more than likely be open to that.
Mm.
But nothing project wise. I mean, I think I'll be frank. The project person for me is the fangirl at this moment. That her
That
or
sounds right.
Alex.
That
Yeah,
sounds right.
her or
That
Alex when I
sounds
come
right.
up there.
Between the both of them,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean
From my
they keep me pretty
experience.
busy when I come up there. So and I see like the stuff that you do with them too. So it's just um yeah, so
I'm
I don't have anything like down here. I mean, like I said, I've got my book of themes and I know, I've mentioned to the fangirl, like I've got this huge book of themes. Well, not huge, but I've got this book of themes that I'm gonna go through with you at some point entirely. But whether she's as willing as she says, who knows? So we all have, and then obviously the distance makes it a little more difficult
yeah,
for us to do it. So
perfect. So any last words or thoughts you want to say to the everyone watching?
uh I mean, I think my biggest thing is just like if you're a photographer and you end up listening to this, I mean, do what you're doing and enjoy what you're doing. And I think that's the biggest thing. I think the questions that you were asking me got me to think about a lot of this stuff.
No, believe me, yeah,
Why?
it's a good refresher, honestly.
Yeah, like why I'm doing this, why I put myself through some of this at times. And I think a lot of it, and it's not actually sometimes even just.
Correct. That's
Yeah,
wrong.
I mean, now that I'm going to voice it, it's not necessarily even for the images that I'm making, it's for the people that
Hmm.
I'm, working with. I mean, it's, when I say I miss you guys up there, I really do. I mean,
No, I
it's
imagine.
crazy to think like, it's been just a little over a year now, but it's like, when I come up there, it's like, oh my gosh, it feels like, I haven't been gone that long, but it's one of those things where I think there's something to be said about our local. I still even say our, but the local Chicago community when it comes to this is just it's a pretty damn strong, vibrant community.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't know if I'll ever find again, but I as long as I have family up there, I am able to come back. I think I will do it as much as I can. So.
Oh yeah. Oh, perfect. So, for those who don't know, where can we follow you at on your socials?
I'm on Instagram is probably my primary one. It's Anthony H Win photo. I do also share that stuff to Facebook, which is Anthony H Win Photography. I'm on Threads and Blue Sky, but I think Blue Sky I'm not even posting anything. Threads, I just literally click the send from Instagram button or whatever it
Oh
is.
yeah.
So yeah, so that's pretty much where you can find me. Obviously, I have a website. Um, if you email me there, I apologize because website sometimes doesn't filter out the spam, and so I don't check the emails there as much. Directly contacting me on Instagram is probably your best bet. That's frankly where I think, oddly enough, some of these models that I work with frequently, we have each other's phone numbers, but it's easier for us to talk on Instagram than it is to text.
Oh no, yeah, fair.
Yeah. So
No,
yeah, I think Instagram is like where you'd probably find me the most.
perfect there. So, well, no, thank you, Anthony, so much for being here, for being the guest of our 5th episode in May, and for giving so much wise words of advice, especially in terms of whether it's the legal aspect or organizing cosplay retreats, as well as just being a photographer in general. So, I want to thank you so much for that.
No, thank you for having me on. It was fun. I
No,
enjoyed
exactly.
it.
No, I'm glad here. So
I'm glad we could catch up a little.
no, exactly. Honestly, yeah, it was kind of nice, especially because I missed you visiting here in Chicago. And in fact, I think the last time I talked with you was back in what was it? When
I
you
came
we had
by
that
like at New Year's of this year, so we might have chatted briefly online.
maybe
But
chat briefly online, but at least the last time I saw you was like at that Korean barbecue that we had with at on Milwaukee. I'm blanking the name of the restaurants. Iron Ages or
yeah,
whatever it's called.
Iron Age or whatever,
I
something
don't
like
know,
that. Yeah,
something to that
yeah,
degree, but I don't
yeah.
know, but no. But as always, thank you so much, Anthony, for being here, uh, and all that stuff. For anyone who is interested, you can follow him on his socials right here at Anthony H Win Photo, whether on Instagram, Blue Sky, or his website as well. And yeah, thank you so much. I'm gonna wrap up everything over here. But yeah, so thank you to everyone who popped in: Haley, Juan, Maverick, a little bit of a Clover Cat as well. Hopefully, we'll be back to our normal streaming schedule as well in due time, but we'll figure about that. But I'll keep everyone updated. In terms of anyone photoshopping or doing photography, there's not too many going on tonight. I'm like, I've been looking and I don't see too many. So I think we're just going to wrap it up here. No rates at all. But yeah, thank you so much for everyone who came in for another edition. Stay updated for the next episode and I'll keep updated there. So see you around. Take care. Talk to you later. Bye bye.